I always wanted to serve on a jury.
I'm really super excited to be here, so I really appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Creating this whole trial, Daddy.
I want to give a big shout out to the 13th Jury Podcast and Brandi.
Yeah, I applaud you guys. Keep doing what you're doing.
That every time you run into Phil Barber, you should reach for it.
And then I just look to the jury, and it's sort of like, look.
I was in the eye of the storm, and you guys were watching the storm.
Hey, if you're bored of work, come pop in and say, hey, want some coffee?
You are a ray of sunshine, and I love what you've done with your YouTube channel.
Hello, jurors. Hello. Good morning. Hello. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. It is good to see you. I hope you had great weekends and that everything was exactly how you wanted it to be. I had planned on a couple different things today. We have the closing arguments for the Nya Thao trial. That's going on. Actually, right now they're doing it. The prosecution did theirs, and defense is actually doing it right this moment. I was planning on doing this intro right now, but there's the final hearing at 3:00. So I think we might swap this up a little bit. It might make sense to swap things up a little bit. Because they've already done the jury instructions, the judge read jury instructions, and then they've done the prosecution, and then the defense is going right now. So since they're doing a final hearing for Tellus at 3, it might make more sense for us to go ahead and do the closing arguments now for Thao, and then switch gears and do the Tellus introduction right before they do the hearing. How does that sound? Good? Fine? Acceptable? Because they've gotten a big enough head start right now with the openings, the closing statement, or closing, oh, goodness gracious, get your words together, Brandi. They've gotten far enough ahead with the closing arguments right now that we can watch it without having to sit there and listen to them in real time, because Lord knows they so slow. They so slow. So slow. So what are we thinking? How are we feeling? Instead of doing that one at 1:30, I think it might make sense to do them opposite. Thoughts? What are we thinking? How are we feeling? When we talked about this one last week, I kind of gave just a very small breakdown on it. But basically, elected official in Las Vegas, he was not a good dude, kind of a bully, kind of a jerk, having an affair, allegedly, on his wife. Some of the employees in his office reported him to this reporter, Jeff German. And I will be honest, I read court, you know how I am. Before I watch any coverage on it, I read court documents. So I read court documents, and it's spelled German. So in my head, I always heard German, or said it German. And then when I watched some of the hearings and stuff, then they pronounce it German. So, but in my mind, I had already assigned him the name German. So if you hear me say German, that is why. I slip back to my own pronunciation that I adopt when I'm doing the court documents. So if you hear that, that's why. But it's actually pronounced German. But anywho, Jeff German is the victim. He was stabbed outside of his home. The people in Robert Tellis's office reached out to him and told him about some of the stuff that was going on. He reported on it, and when re-election came back up, Robert Tellis was not reelected. And I think it was about I'd have to look at all my notes. I think it was about 3 months later, Jeff German ended up dead. He was stabbed outside of his Las Vegas home. And there is a camera across the street that caught a video of it. And you can see the guy who did it walking along the road, and he has on, it's a typical kind of stuff that you would wear if you're, like, you see landscapers, in the summer that wear like the long sleeves with like the big hats, to keep the sun off of them because they're in the sun all day. So it's kind of like that typical outfit that you would see like that. So as he's walking down the street, you would just think that it's just somebody in the neighborhood doing yard work or whatever. Like one of those big straw type hats and long sleeve shirt and stuff. So you can see this guy kind of hiding behind the gate. And when Jeff goes outside, the guy stabs him, kills him, and he's left in his side yard. Camera caught that. Camera from across the street caught that. There are also cameras that caught the fella walking, and he has a very distinct walk. It's kind of like a little bit of a limp-ish. Like he favors one side. It's not really like a limp. It's kind of like he favors one side. But it's a very distinct walk. And that same walk is the same walk that Robert Tellis has, which is interesting. It also caught him getting into a car. It was like a wine colored, I think it was like a Denali or something, big SUV. And turns out Tellis has, his wife has that same car that is registered in her name. There were reporters from Jeff German's newspaper from that same office who went to Tellis's house and were able to photograph him outside in the yard or in the driveway with this same car and like washing it. Interesting. And they did a search of his house, and then they found the big straw hat that was caught on camera. They found one of those kind of like cut up in the trash can. So that was what kicked off the whole thing. But then the big kicker, Robert Tellis's DNA was found under Jeff German's fingernails. So he was arrested. Now, Robert Tellis says that he is being framed, that was planted evidence, and it is not his, and he is not responsible. So that is the very basic information. There's more to it than that, but that's just kind of like the Cliff's Notes version. So he is supposed to be starting as soon as possible. I mentioned too that this has kind of become like a big First Amendment argument as well. Some of the information from Jeff's computer had, because keep in mind he's a journalist, had sources and confidential sources and things that they didn't want out. So there's become a whole secondary argument with them arguing over that. So that is the very basic Cliff's Notes version. But we were planning on doing the intro to that today. But since there's a hearing for him, the final hearing, I think, is scheduled for 3 o'clock, and we're going to watch that. So I think that we may flip-flop our streams, even though I'll have to change the thumbnail and everything. But we may flip-flop our streams and go ahead and do the closing arguments for Thao now. Thao now, brown cow. Sound good? He thinks they planted DNA nerve hinges. Well, that's his story. That's his story. So that's what he's going with. All right, so does that sound like a plan though? I think that makes the most sense. I think doing the other, rather than do this and then go back and then come back to this and all the back and forth, I think it makes more sense to swap them. So let's swap the thumbnails real quick. Just gotta swap everything. Swap it all. Swap it all. Closing arguments. Share. Download. Download. Change. Closing arguments. Closing arguments. I'll change the descriptions later, but we'll just do this part for now. Okie dokie. All right, so let's see. I've got the first part. We're going to skip jury instructions. Oops. Oh gosh, the audio is bad today too, which really stinks because I hate bad audio. There's nothing worse than bad audio. Okay, there are things worse, but sound booster. There are worse things, but it sure is annoying. All right, so let's see. Entire screen, share. All right, so we are going to do closing arguments. I'm pretty sure I have playback speed at 1.5 right now.
State ready with the closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead and proceed.
With that, may I please have from the clerk exhibits 112,
We'll try 1.25.
and 114.
We'll start at 1.25 and see how that goes. And I will turn on closed caption. There's the shoes. All right, here we go.
Nemo Yang, Peng Lor, Trevor Maloney. Young men in their early 20s hauled out to an empty quarry in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night.
Oh my gosh, the brakes. I'm already annoyed. Okay.
Forced onto their knees, made to crawl out to a gate to look out into the darkness. Their hands behind their head, and executed one by one by one. Over money, over loyalty. Who all is responsible? Who all is culpable? Who all is concerned in the commission of this horrific crime? Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence that you've heard and seen throughout this trial makes it very clear that there were two men, two friends, two associates, two brothers, Mr. Khamthaneth Rattanasack and Mr. Nya Thao, the defendant. These two men are responsible, are culpable, were concerned in the commission of the crime. They worked together and in concert to find and capture their prey and take them out in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night to execute them and leave them for dead and flee off into the night across the state. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I say very specifically concerned in the commission of the crime of these clearly intentional homicides, because that is the law of this case. And Judge Levine just read it to you. We saw you flipping through and reading it along. That is the crime that Mr. Thao is charged with. That is the crime that it is the state's, it is my burden, it is Ms. Rood's burden to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt. Party to a crime. Whoever is concerned in the commission of a crime is a party to that crime and may be convicted of that crime, although that person did not directly commit it. There are three ways in which Mr. Thao can be a party to a crime: by directly committing it, by intentionally aiding and abetting the person who directly committed it, or by being a member of a conspiracy to commit the crime.
Thank you, Zach.
The defendant intentionally aided and abetted the commission of these three homicides, then he is guilty of the crime as well as the person who directly committed it. If he was a member of a conspiracy to commit these three homicides, and these three homicides were committed by any member of the conspiracy, then he and all members of the conspiracy are guilty of those three homicides. I read these words to you because they are the most important. These are the crimes. These are what we're here for. And I would like to make clear, as the judge read to you, that you do not all need to agree on one of these three ways to find that Mr. Thao was concerned in the commission of these horrific homicides. All 12 jurors do not have to agree whether the defendant directly committed, intentionally aided and abetted, or was a member of a conspiracy to commit the crime. However, each juror, each of you, must be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was concerned in the commission of the three homicides in one of those three ways. Ladies and gentlemen, with these three ways to be concerned in the commission of the crime, I think of this like a pyramid a little bit. The layers add up, they stack up, and they provide support for each other as you go. And so with that, I'd like to start at the bottom of the pyramid and discuss what evidence proves that the defendant, Mr. Thao, was a member of a conspiracy to kill Nemo Yang, Peng Lor, and Trevor Maloney. A member of a conspiracy. A person is a member of a conspiracy if, with intent that a crime be committed, the person agrees with or joins with another for the purpose of committing that crime. A conspiracy is a mutual understanding to accomplish some common objective or work together for a common criminal purpose. It is not necessary that the conspirators had any express or formal agreement, or that they had a meeting, or that they all knew each other, although it's abundantly clear in this case. Black and Cush most certainly knew each other. If a person is a member of a conspiracy to commit a crime and that crime was committed by any member of the conspiracy, then that person and all members of the conspiracy are guilty of that crime. Mutual understanding, common objective, work together. Three operative phrases in this definition. Ladies and gentlemen, when people come together with a mutual understanding, with a common objective, and they work together towards that objective, and they do it on, for example, a football field, we call it a team. When they do it working together at a rock quarry in the middle of nowhere, in the dead of night and 3 people get executed, we call it a conspiracy. It's a crime team, if you will. So then let's look at the evidence of Mr. Rattanasack and Mr. Thao's teamwork, their mutual understanding, their common objective, their working together. First, we see that they worked together to get the boys to the quarry in the first place. You heard at length last week about the various steps that Black and Mr. Thao took at the Holiday Inn. Black, Mr. Rattanasack ordering Bridget Schlicht to follow him at gunpoint. And then the defendant, Mr. Thao, getting in Bridget Schlicht's car, getting right behind where she was going to be sitting in the driver's seat, sitting behind her where she can't see him, where he can see her, where she is totally and completely vulnerable to him. And she told you she was scared of him sitting behind her. She didn't know if he had a gun or not. It's clear from the evidence there was only one gun, the .40 caliber, but she doesn't know that. She's sitting there in that driver's seat, no idea what's behind her, just somebody, Mr. Thao, who she knew, giving directions. And then on that drive, what was he doing? He was ordering her where to go, telling her where to go. Where did they go? Well, they went along 16, turned on M, go up to the quarry. We heard about it's remote. There's not a lot around there. It's the middle of nowhere. And in fact, it's out in the middle of nowhere such that Black, Mr. Rattanasack, he didn't exactly know how to get there. He wasn't from the area. We heard that. Mr. Thao was from the area. He was from La Crosse. Black was not. He was the newcomer. And that's why at one point during the drive, there's the phone call that Bridget overhears between the defendant and his brother Black, where Black says, let's switch places. Those aren't the exact words. I'm paraphrasing. You go in front. Now, we had heard that Ms. Schlicht had been to Nemo's mom's house up by that bump out on M, but that's 2 or so miles, 2 miles from the quarry, quite a distance, 2 miles. That's as far up M as she had ever been that she'd gotten before, and she told you that. But Mr. Thao knows, and he gives the directions, and he leads her there. He's providing directions to the quarry. Why am I emphasizing this? This seems why there's so much other interesting evidence in this case. Why are you talking about giving directions in a car? Interesting that out of all of the testimony we heard about that awful, scary car ride out to the quarry and the phone calls going on, the back and forth, all the Facebook phone calls, you never heard, not one time, that Black said to Mr. Thao on the phone or to Bridget or anyone, hey, we're going to the quarry. You didn't hear in any of those phone calls, any of those conversations, the word quarry exchanged. Why is that important? What does that tell us? It tells us that that was the mutual understanding. Mr. Thao already knew where to go. Bridget Schlicht didn't pick this place. So even if you followed that line of defense questions, insinuating that she knew how to get to the quarry, there's no evidence, none whatsoever, that she was given some kind of free rein to choose this location or that she was ever even told the final destination. Which leaves you with 2 options, both of which go to their conspiracy. First, that Black chose it and told Mr. Thao ahead of time, and then somehow forgot the directions, didn't remember them, wasn't familiar, easy enough to slip your mind, needed him to go ahead, get in front, I forgot how to get there. Or number 2, that Mr. Thao chose it. That Mr. Thao chose the remote location in the middle of nowhere, in the dead of night, in the area that he was from, in the La Crosse area. Black's not from the area, he is. Either way, that shows you that there was a plan between Black and Mr. Thao. No one ever had to say out loud what that plan was, where they were going. And as we think about this plan between the two men responsible, I want to discuss the plan to kill and the defendant's clear knowledge of that plan. I want to talk about the Facebook messages, the Facebook phone calls. Let's talk about the Facebook messages and the Facebook phone calls from Mr. Thao's account. One of the things we've learned through this trial was that the motive behind all of this was some kind of debt. Nemo stole money. Everybody's looking for Nemo. Nemo ripped us off. Michael Vang, Bam Bam, told you in his own way that Nemo was suspected, accused of stealing this money. And Mr. Vang, having known Nemo his whole life, practically, babysat him growing up, he offered to pay it. He'd come into money, said, I'll pay the debt. And that's when someone said to him, I don't want your money, I want his life. Probably didn't use it in the nice tone of voice I used. I don't want your money, I want his life. There's a lot to unpack there. First of all, that statement came from a voice speaking through Mr. Thao's Facebook account. Now, Mr. Vang couldn't say on the witness stand whose voice it was, whether it was Black's or whether it was Mr. Thao's. He has said previously, he said at the time it was Black's. He can't say that now. Let's go with what he said before. Sure. But we know that that voice came through the defendant's account. What does that mean? What does that mean? Anybody who's ever used a Facebook account made a call through Facebook Messenger. So we know from this, we have Mr. Thao allowing his friend, his brother, his teammate, if you will, to use his Facebook account. He's allowing him to use that, to make threats like this. How would Black have been able to call through the defendant's account? The defendant would have opened up his account, handed over his phone, and now I say his phone, it's not reasonable. We have no reason to think. It is not a reasonable hypothesis that they're working some sort of laptop. We heard nothing about a laptop, or that they're at somebody's place with a desktop trying to do some sort of call through that. It's a Facebook app through the phone. We heard through Investigator Amundsen. It was associated with the defendant's phone number. It's an app on his phone. And so to use his account, to have Black use his account, he opens it up, hands it over. And so the defendant would have been, at the very least at that time, on notice that this situation was incredibly serious. I want his life. Is it really so outlandish? Do you want to listen to it faster? That's at 1.25. Outlandish to believe people when they tell us something like this? Is it really so outlandish to think that when someone says, I don't want your money, I want his life, that perhaps they don't want your money, they want his life? Is it so outlandish to mean what you say and say what you mean? At that point, at the very least, the defendant was on notice. He knew this was serious, this was going someplace. Well, what other Facebook evidence is there that Mr. Thao and Black went to the quarry with a plan, with a mutual understanding, a common criminal objective, working together to kill the boys? We have the messages. These messages, what they show, we'll read through them, is that the defendant, Mr. Thao, is the collections department for Mr. Rattanasack. He's Black's collections department. This is exactly like what happens when debt goes unpaid and it goes to collections and collections starts calling. Hey, you need to get that 80 to my big bro when he gets better today. You hear me? He's coming to collect only. Real talk. Real talk, Nemo. He ain't playing games. Mr. Thao, collecting. And a day goes by, and he gets more upset because he's not getting paid. Black's not getting his money. Games, hours gone. You're too late. I told you already. When are you going to get the money? Because he tripped Amy. He's upset. He's mad. Time to pay up. Let's go. Collections. Bro, we need to see like 60 to 80. It's July 20th now. Still going. Nemo owes money. Pay up now. Black's getting mad. Mr. Thao is doing Black's dirty work. We go on and there are messages to other people now about the growing tension, the growing need for Nemo Yang to pay up. July 21, the Thai BWJ. It's all online shit. I can guarantee half the money till my bro Black is here and give me the other. The significance of this, ladies and gentlemen, and why this shows Mr. Thao is doing the dirty work. He's doing the collections. He and Black are a team. They're a conspiracy. They're sharing money. The money, Black's money, flows through Mr. Thao. It flows back and forth. I can guarantee half till my bro Black is here. There isn't his money. It's flowing through each other. It's their money. A debt to one is a debt to both. And even further, it would appear in addition to just Black having money taken by Nemo, now in July 16th, 17th, Mr. Thao is starting to suspect, he's starting to accuse Nemo Yang of also stealing money from him. This is personal debt to him. Have you seen my debt card, debit card, debt card? Looking for it. It's my mission. I'm missing all my money. It's all I have. I'm bummed about it. Nemo had to have taken it. Black's mad. Nemo owes him money. The defendant is mad. Nemo took his money. It's been going on for days now. Games, hours gone. Your time is running out. Call. Have it your way. LMFAO. Laughing my.
Okay, so remember, those are all of those calls and everything that we looked at Friday. When they brought those up, when it showed the timeline of him calling over and over, Nemo's not answering. He got mad. It was $618. I see Donna asking Donna Barry. It was $618, and he said that he thought that he had his cards missing as well, but he was calling and said something about how he was going to go after his family and all of that. So it's showing like the progression of how he was getting mad over it, and it never got resolved. So it was leading to them working together. He like Thao and Black / Rattanasack, whatever, were in on all of this together.
Acting ass off. Tell Nemo, since he won't show himself, I'm going for his family. Time's up. I know his family. I could not be more serious. I'm looking for Nemo. Nemo owes us money. We're done here. July 18th through 19th. Just a few days before Nemo Yang pays for that debt. Nemo Yang pays for that debt with his life. And now it's at this time, these few days before the shooting, that Black, Mr. Rattanasack, and the defendant start looking for Nemo. It's about the 20th, 21st of that week, Tuesday, Wednesday-ish, when Michael Luco sees the defendant, sees specifically Mr. Thao, who he's known at that time for 15 or so years. He sees Mr. Thao, along with his brother Black, at a house, and the defendant is looking for Nemo. He's got a .40 caliber Glock in his waistband, and it's a significant, it's a salient piece of evidence there. Mr. Luco sees a .40 caliber Glock in his waistband. He knew this, .40 caliber Glock. Interest to me that for all of Michael Luco's baggage, and he's got a lot, absolutely, that years, over a year, almost 2 years, before that .40 caliber Glock was found by Seth Barna picking up trash along the side of the road, collected by Deputy Ratkovich, and confirmed by Jessica Crawford. Years before that, over a year, almost 2 years, Mr. Luco knows a .40 caliber Glock. And it's important that he says that. He says, I saw it in his waistband. And what did he tell you? How did he know? He said, well, it's written right on the side of the barrel. And before it was ever found, look at that there. What's written right on the side of the barrel? Glock, 40. Also in those days, the 20th, 21st, Tuesday, Wednesday, before the shootings, Flora Johnson sees Mr. Rattanasack and his brother, the defendant, at the wharf. And they're looking for Nemo. The defendant is looking for Nemo. and the defendant has a gun in his waistband. Bro and Black, bro, brother, and the defendant looking for Nemo. And at that time specifically, it's the defendant flashing a gun. They've got a gun, they're showing a gun, looking for Nemo. I want his life. That's what guns do. And then it gets to be the 22nd, gets to be Thursday, and the defendant, Mr. Thao, is the one talking with Mr. Vang, Bam Bam, working to round everybody up, doing Black's dirty work. July 22nd, between the defendant and Michael Vang. Some of us talk, you can have them. Who them? I know, because he a snitch. Interesting, he says, because he a snitch. What did we learn was the quickest, easiest way to make yourself a target for physical violence? Him and his guy. Who his guy? The little guy with him. Where? Dude, when you call about that, they made them leave, bro. Made them leave the hotel. Let's talk on my way. What room? Mr. Tao's trying to find out. What room? What room? Where are you? Where are they? Let's talk. Let's meet in person. Mr. Vang does not want to meet in person. They ain't here. We don't want to do anything to do with them. I got my own drama. I don't want to be a part of your drama, Mr. Vang said. Don't want to be a part of this. You can have them. Be done. Still looking for the room number. Have to chase this bitch down. Supposed to have been with Nemo. Mr. Vang uses a Hmong phrase. That's significant because he used Hmong at times to speak with the defendant, not Black. Hang here with both. Call and no answer. Now, we had testimony from Mr. Vang from Bam Bam, sort of saying that he thought maybe this was going to be a beatdown. If he thought it was going to be a shooting, might have done something different. Well, it's significant on that point, ladies and gentlemen. What do we hear? They're not in a room together. Mr. Thao wants to meet up, and Mr. Vang does it. They're not in a room together. They're not together. That's important because Mr. Vang didn't see the Glock. Bam Bam didn't know a gun was involved at that point. Could he have suspected? I don't know, but he didn't say that he saw one. He didn't say that he knew one was involved. He did not testify about that. Perhaps if Mr. Vang had met up and seen the .40 caliber Glock, he'd have thought otherwise. Now on that point, let's take a moment and look at a few other reasons why this maybe Mr. Thao thought it was just going to be a beatdown theory that's been hinted at is not reasonable, does not reconcile with the evidence. A gun has been flashed, a gun is involved at that point. And once again, a dark, empty quarry in the middle of nowhere, in the dead of night. It's dark, and there's no one there but those 6 people. Now, counsel back last Monday made reference to a saying, if you don't want to slip, don't go to slippery places. Ladies and gentlemen, it does not get more slippery than an empty quarry at 2:30 in the morning with no one around. It's so slippery, it's practically a slip and slide. Ladies and gentlemen, this situation reminds me, there's a pretty famous movie that's got the tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream." Well, ladies and gentlemen, at a rock quarry, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, no one can hear 10 gunshots. Let us think about Bridget for a moment. Bridget Schlicht, who testified, she said, I thought maybe they'd just get beat up. Bridget Schlicht, ladies and gentlemen, is the poster child for shock and denial about what was going on, what happened all along through her experience. So much so is her shock and denial about this whole situation that even after it happens, and even after she's terrified, and even after she gets back, she's driving back to the Holiday Inn, she calls Trevor Maloney's phone. She saw Trevor Maloney get shot in the temple, dropped to the ground, and she called his phone. Why'd she call his phone? That's denial. What did she tell you? I was hoping he would answer. Hope against hope, praying that what she'd just seen, this horrific action, wasn't actually true, hadn't actually happened. Trevor didn't pick up. Trevor never picked up again. Trevor was laying on the ground at the quarry, not answering his phone. That's denial. Let us also not forget something interesting about Bridget. Bridget told you about having a black eye and about getting jumped at a Quick Trip in the days prior. With that, ladies and gentlemen, you get a taste for how a beatdown actually goes down. punch its black eye at Quick Trip within city limits. What did Bridget do? She took her licks. She moved on. That's a beatdown. That's not being in a quarry in the middle of the night, getting executed by a gate.
Crazy.
And then lastly, I asked you all to remember Trevor. Trevor sitting in the back passenger seat of Bridget's car, riding out to his death. What did Trevor say? He told Mr. Thao about his two beautiful girls.
That part's really sad.
Sitting in that car, tells the defendant, I have two beautiful daughters. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't tell someone about your two beautiful children waiting for you at home because you think you're going to get beat up. You don't tell someone about your two beautiful daughters because of a beatdown. You tell someone sitting behind the driver, breathing down her neck, about your two beautiful daughters because you want them to know that you have something to live for, that there are children who are going to be affected by what's about to happen. There are children who are going to have no father if you do what Trevor knew in the pit of his stomach was going to happen. You say that because you don't want to never see them again. Trevor Maloney knew exactly what was going to happen. And so did Mr. Thao, sitting right next to him. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Thao and his brother Black joined together for their common criminal objective of taking the boys out to the quarry to never come back. Let me just say this. I think it's clear when I talk about taking the boys to their death through the evidence that Mr. Rattanasack and the defendant's true target was Nemo. But Peng Lor, his guy, the little guy with him, gets included with Nemo. And then Trevor Maloney, just hanging around and smoking meth, gets swept up in it too when he lies about who he's with on the phone and where they are. So by the time that they're all driving to the quarry, the targets have now become all three young men. Let us put conspiracy aside and turn to aiding and abetting. A person intentionally aids and abets the commission of a crime when acting with knowledge or belief that another person is committing or intends to commit a crime. He knowingly either assists the person who commits the crime or is ready and willing to assist. And the person who commits the crime knows of the willingness to assist. To intentionally aid and abet first-degree intentional homicide, the defendant, Mr. Thao, must know that another person is committing or intends to commit the crime of first-degree intentional homicide and have the purpose to assist the commission of that crime. However, a person does not aid and abet if he is only a bystander or spectator and does nothing to assist the commission of a crime. First, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence that I've gone through, the evidence that the defendant knowingly assisted with these homicides is the same as what I've gone through. It's the same as the conspiracy. That's our pyramid. Being a member of the conspiracy and doing the actions I've gone through, that's assisting, that's providing assistance, that's being ready and willing to assist. I've already gone through that. So let's look at what additional evidence there is that goes towards aiding and abetting. How he assisted at the quarry and how the defendant knowingly was ready and willing to assist. With that, let's talk about shoe prints for a moment. We see here from one of Nick Stalky's photographs, we have the shoe prints. We have the two voids where the two cars were, consistent with what Bridget told you. Bridget's car at the top, Mr. Rattanasack's on the bottom. We had those closer shoe print markers, 23, 24, 25. Mr. Stalky told you about those being the waffle print. And the majority of what was in between being the chevrons. And especially I find it interesting, marker number 8. We're at a different angle when we look at this one. Hard to see. It's in the most back.
Where'd she go?
8. All the way up at the top. 8 is a chevron. Mr. Stalky told you 8 was a chevron. What this is consistent with is Bridget's car pulling in and that number 8 chevron, the seat behind the driver's seat, getting out, coming around the back, 9, 10, 11, chevron, 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 and going between the cars. Many chevrons. Mr. Thao's chevrons. And then consistent with the car backing in and the driver being closest to us, getting out consistent with the waffle impressions. And then we have this image when we think about shoe prints. Mr. Peng Lor's foot, his shoe, and then what is all around him? Prints upon prints upon prints upon prints. There are waffle prints. There are chevrons. Many, many, many chevrons. Chevrons kicking Nemo in the chest, which is corroborated, I would note, by Dr. Reichert's autopsy finding that Nemo Yang had abrasions on his chest. Chevrons pacing back and forth. Chevrons emptying out pockets. Chevrons turning over Mr. Lor's body. Chevrons assisting the homicide. At some point, ladies and gentlemen, here at the quarry, any thought, any hope that this was just a beatdown had to have been utterly wiped away and replaced with clear knowledge and clear understanding of exactly what was happening. When those boys were put on their knees, ordered onto their knees, made to crawl out, get up against the gate, put their hands behind their head, turn out your pockets. Those are the actions of an execution. That's not a beatdown. And that was all happening right in front of Mr. Thao. And then pacing, assisting, turning pockets out. After they're dead, turning Peng Lor over. This is so significant, ladies and gentlemen, because how these bodies are lined up, how they were shot in the back of the head, shows you that that's exactly how this was set up, how this was arranged, how these men, how Black ordered them up against the gate. It was happening right in front of Mr. Thao's eyes, exactly in the manner Bridget described. It was set up exactly like an execution. And that tells you, ladies and gentlemen, that this did not happen all in a hurry, out of the blue, spontaneous, all of a sudden bullets flying. Oh no, they were placed there, which means anybody there, anybody observing that, saw it and would have known exactly what was now going on. Bridget knew exactly what was going on. That's why it's important that when Black said, shut up or get on your knees and join them, Bridget shut up, didn't join them. She didn't want to get shot. She didn't want to be put up against a gate, execution style. She knew exactly what was going on. And so too did Mr. Thao. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, once Mr. Thao saw them getting lined up, he knew exactly what was going to happen. And that's the significance of him then assisting at that time, emptying the pockets, turning Mr. Lor's body over. And those actions prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was ready and willing to assist Black. And Black would have seen and known of that willingness to assist. The next evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that proves aiding and abetting beyond a reasonable doubt, and in fact, in many ways, is some of the strongest and clearest signs that Mr. Thao acted at the quarry with knowledge, with intent, and belief that he was aiding and abetting 3 intentional homicides, is all of his actions after the fact. We call that consciousness of guilt. You heard the judge use that phrase when he read the jury instructions to you, consciousness of guilt. And I want to point you specifically to this instruction that says evidence has been presented relating to the defendant's conduct after the alleged crime was committed. Whether the evidence shows a consciousness of guilt and whether consciousness of guilt shows actual guilt are matters exclusively for you to decide. These are the things one does, the things you do because you know how very, very guilty you are. So much so, there's an entire jury instruction about it. This evidence of consciousness of guilt, that after these 3 young men were dead, alone, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, we know that Mr. Thao got into Black's car, got into his Mercedes-Benz, titled in Ms. Kryle's name, and the 2 of them just drove away. And they drove through the night, in the early morning, out all the way to Algoma, over 200 miles northeast, driving together in the night out to Algoma. Before they got very far, they dumped the gun, started getting rid of evidence. They dumped this gun here, this .40 caliber Glock, the one found by Mr. Barna, collected by Deputy Ratkovich, confirmed by Jessica Crawford to be the gun that shot the bullets, the fired cartridge cases on the scene that killed the 3 boys. It was found in this location by Mr. Barna. And as we look at this location, let me point out, it's a little, one is right here. On the other side of the makeshift guardrail on the shoulder of the road. That gun located in 7305 County Road M, Holman, Wisconsin, on M. What was described to you was that as we're looking at this photograph, we are facing northeast. We're facing northeast as the car is driving northeast on M. And that gun is on the passenger side of the road. Why is that important that it's on the passenger side of the road? Well, who's the passenger in the car? Nya Thao is the passenger in the car. Nya Thao threw the gun out the window. It is not reasonable, ladies and gentlemen, whatsoever to think Mr. Rattanasack was not driving the car he was, I guess, borrowing, using, given to him by Ms. Cryle. It is not reasonable whatsoever to think that on this drive away from the scene, Black's driving and sort of says, hey, Mr. Thao, why don't you lean back? Driving, opens the passenger window, throws the gun out on top of Mr. Thao. Mr. Thao dumped that gun. That's what these show you. Dumping that gun shows you Mr. Thao has consciousness of guilt. Mr. Thao is willing to assist with a crime. Mr. Thao is totally okay at this point with what he's assisted with what has happened. He's okay getting rid of the evidence. That's consciousness of guilt. That is not all of the consciousness of guilt. Mr. Thao is also in Algoma. He's at Mr. Rattanasack's girlfriend's house. A little unclear what exactly their relationship is. We'll say girlfriend. In the morning during the day of July 23rd, Ms. Todd Weckler told you there's this other guy kind of hiding back in the shadows. Mr. Weckler can't identify him. But Mr. Tao's mail can. Mr. Tao's cardholder services mail identifies him. There in Algoma and Virginia Cryle's garage, garbage, along with lacrosse quick trip receipts and the Family Dollar in Muscadet. Nya Thao's mail. And not insignificant mail. We have made a final determination regarding the claim referenced above. He's supposed to be getting money because he's missing money. Money is important to Nya Thao. It's important to everyone. I would also note when we look at this mail, it would appear Nya Thao was not homeless, at least not June 30th of 2021. Nya Thao has an address on Flint Street in Onalaska. What else is Nya Thao a part of in Algoma? What do they do in Algoma? They get rid of bags of evidence, holsters, bullets, clothes, dumping more evidence, more consciousness of guilt. Then after dumping the Mercedes-Benz in the Green Bay area, Mr. Thao finds himself in Wausau, a place he was not from. Finds himself in this house in Wausau a couple days later wearing a long black wig, a baseball cap, and writing in his journal. When he wrote in the journal, we don't know. But he's got a journal in his backpack. He's been writing in it. What does Nya Thao write in his journal? A journal, a place you put your innermost thoughts, perhaps. What does he write in his journal? Does he write, "Dear diary, I cannot believe the horrific thing I just saw. I thought we were just going to beat these guys up, but instead, my brother Black shot them. How will I ever deal with this trauma?" Does he write anything like that? No. Nya Thao starts brainstorming ways to call Bridget Schlicht a liar. Notes on Bridget's motive. Dislikes me. Nosy in her own way. Nosy in her way. Of what? What I do that led her to target. Things/actions. Her. Don't indulge in her. Silent treatment. Never gets what she wants. I stand in her way of getting plugged. Why me? Easy target. Slow and stupid. Illiterate. Don't know how to explain points and views. Blunt and words mean different things. Counsel did his best when we talked about the journal to make it seem like somehow these are, I guess, Nya Thao's earnest notes anticipating being thrown under the bus by Ms. Schlicht. Why would Mr. Thao be in a position? Why would he think he was being targeted by Ms. Schlicht? How would he have any idea what Ms. Schlicht said to police? Why would he have any idea that Ms. Schlicht even went to police? Let's remember, where did Nya Thao and Bridget Schlicht leave things? A 9-minute phone call that she had initiated. As counsel insinuated, trauma bonding over that phone call. What did he say? "Bridget, you're a good friend." Is that somebody you need to start writing down notes on Bridget's motive? And let's also notice there was a lot of questions about this. Slow and stupid, illiterate. We had a lot of questions about proper punctuation and the use of an exclamation point or a question mark. I would put to you, ladies and gentlemen, let's consider instead the oxymoron it would be to call yourself illiterate by correctly spelling the word illiterate. And doing so in perfect, beautiful, cursive penmanship. Not a single word is misspelled. Is Mr. Thao the one that he's saying, oh, I'm illiterate, I'm slow and stupid? Mr. Thao is getting ready to call Ms. Schlitt slow and stupid, illiterate, from Vernon County, meth addict. She's the easy target. You know what, ladies and gentlemen? There's the journal. You saw it. You've seen it twice now. You all read this. Draw your own conclusions. You heard the testimony. You know what words mean, why people write them down, why people do what they do and when. You, ladies and gentlemen, know what these journal entries are exactly about. It's consciousness of guilt. And the last part on aiding and abetting I have to comment on is the bystander or spectator portion. It's true, a person does not aid and abet. He is only a bystander or spectator and does nothing to assist the commission of a crime. Ladies and gentlemen, that line is for people who do something like go to the Quick Trip, intending just to get some chicken tenders. They're Midwest nice. You see somebody behind them. They open the door. They say, have a nice day. See you again next time. Something like that. And unknowingly, they've let the armed robber into the Quick Trip. That's a bystander. That's a spectator. That line is for people like Bridget Schlicht, who inadvertently, unknowingly, naively, drove 3 men to their deaths. And then ultimately went to the police, handed over her phone, let them search her car, sat with them for 11 hours, needed a safe house. That's a bystander. That's a spectator. It's not for the person who was at the quarry pacing back and forth, taking things out of men's pockets, and then dumping guns on the side of the road. That's not a bystander. That's not a spectator. That's an active participant.
Good point.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we turn to the final way in which Mr. Thao can be concerned in the commission of the 3 intentional homicides of Nemo Yang, of Peng Lor, and Trevor Maloney. And that's by directly committing it himself. And that's exactly what Bridget Schlicht told you he saw him do. That's what Michael Luco said, told you, the defendant said he did. That Black handed him the gun, and Mr. Thao paced back and forth, and then ultimately said, F it, and pulled the trigger at least 10 times, putting 3, 4 bullet holes in each young man. We'll address Mr. Luco first. Let's call it what it is. The state hides not at all what Mr. Luco is. He's a jailhouse snitch, right? Absolutely. And he comes with baggage. He comes with a lot of baggage. Bags upon bags of baggage. He's a criminal. He's a drug addict. But he's clean and sober now. He's a graduate of drug treatment court. He's employed. Some things that I put to you make him credible, that is believable in his statements to you. He's known the defendant at this point now for about 18 years, knew him for 15 years at the time this happened, and he saw him just a few days before the shooting, before the homicides. Isn't that exactly, ladies and gentlemen, the person you see in jail, scared about the trouble you're in, anxious, worried, and upset? Isn't that exactly the person you speak to? Ladies and gentlemen, you don't speak to Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and upstanding members of the community about having committed a triple homicide. You talk to people you know, you trust, who have their own baggage. You talk to people who have face tattoos. You talk to people who have 10 criminal convictions. You talk to people who have been in and out of jail for, 20 years? Who you talk to? How did Mr. Luco know details? Like that they were on their knees? Or that Black pistol whipped Trevor Maloney? Or that Trevor was shot last? Are we to think Michael Luco, the man with the face tattoos, is reading criminal complaints and committing them to memory? Or that he's memorizing a story given to him by Black? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Luco needed a Post-it to tell him how many criminal convictions he had. This is not a man memorizing criminal complaints and going through discovery that hadn't even been given out at that point. Mr. Luco put himself in danger by snitching. Snitching, easiest, quickest way to make yourself a target in jail. He did not do that to protect himself. There's no evidence that he did that to protect himself, to get any kind of protection from anyone. That's not how snitching works. That's not inmate currency. Inmate currency is ramen noodles and honey buns from Canteen. And then there's Mr. Luco's knowledge, 1.5 years, 2 years before it was found, about the specifics of the gun. He knew it because he saw it. He reported it, Mr. Leinfelder, in August of 2021, and it wasn't even found until April of 23. Ladies and gentlemen, I get it. He's a jailhouse snitch, but his information checks out. It's corroborated by Dr. Reichert, by Nick Salke, by Seth Barna, by Cody Ratkovich, by Jessica Crawford. And then, ladies and gentlemen, that leaves us with Bridget Schlicht. What is there to say about Bridget Schlicht that wasn't already said or made abundantly clear when she testified? Bridget, too, has baggage. Bridget Schlicht is a Vernon County girl with a meth problem who got in way over her head. started off hanging around in hotel rooms and smoking meth. Inappropriate behavior you don't have to condone. But that's who she was. Until that day when everything took a horrific turn and changed her life. I've gone through already so many things that corroborate her story. The final two are these. These many, many chevron prints all around the bodies. What did Bridget say? She said, Mr. Thao, the defendant, was handed the gun, and he was told, you better do this before I do it. And he takes it and he paces. We have all those chevron prints pacing back and forth. And there's that statement, you better do this before I do it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is consistent with those Facebook messages and the Facebook phone calls. And Mr. Vang and those other individuals, Shenoa Dawn, Nicole Wisniewski, messages between Mr. Thao and Nemo Yang. What does Mr. Thao do? He does Black's dirty work. Black tells him to collect, he collects. Black tells him about the friendly warnings, I think they were. Mr. Thao gives the warnings. Black tells him to shoot 3 people, and Mr. Thao does it. And the final piece, ladies and gentlemen, the final piece, that Nya Thao let Bridget Schlicht live. Mr. Thao was the nice one. You're a good friend, Bridget. Black was the mean one. If Khamthaneth Rattanasack had that gun in his hand, there is no way he would let her live.
That's a scary
Black
thought.
had already gotten sex from her, spending that day calling, talking on the phone over an hour, many phone calls. Talked to her, made her feel special, buttered her up, had sex with her, didn't call her again. He had no more use for her. Crass, gross, ugly. He was done with her. There is no way Black, holding that gun, was going to let Bridget Schlicht walk away from that place. He would have absolutely killed her, leaving no witnesses. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nya Thao got that gun he was prohibited from even possessing. The defendant, Nya Thao, executed. Nemo Yang, Peng Lor, Trevor Maloney. The defendant, Nya Thao, is guilty of all 4 counts. Ladies and gentlemen, deliver the verdicts that the evidence demands and justice deserves, and find the defendant guilty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that's that. Let's pull up the defense closing.
The gun is up to the quarry.
They've got
on July 23rd. So the early.
Oh, it starts kind of halfway, not halfway at all. But it starts with him already in it. So the defense closing happens, and he talks for almost an hour and a half, but we're going to listen to it at the faster speed too, because y'all know he's slow too. So defense, and then prosecution has a chance to get back up there again. So we're just starting now. This is the defense attorney.
Early morning hours of July 23rd. We go back in time. We know on July 22nd what she did. She drove around, drove up M to Nemo's parents. She's familiar with that road. She's driven to go get her car. She's driven other places. And then we cycle it back before that. She was working, and she was on the 21st, and on the 20th, she's on the phone with Black that entire time. So this man that she just meets, we have the records, and however intense it gets, the closeness gets on the 20th and the 21st, that's when they're together. They're together talking, they're together, and they have sex, right? They're intimate, right? This is her connection to Black. Now, he's in that parking lot. She walks out. She thought there was going to be a beatdown, as she says it, all right? And I think anybody could say, look, I've not been the subject of a beatdown. My hope is that none of us here in this courtroom have been the subject of a beatdown. But a beatdown is different than a punch. I mean, many of us have been punched before. She thought there was going to be a beatdown, which is different than being punched. And she gets into her car and follows orders from Black. He drives up to the quarry. We know that Nya, according to her, all of the evidence is according to what Bridget tells you. And I'll talk to you about whether or not there's reasons to doubt that later. But what Bridget says is Nya's behind her, which makes sense. Because Peng Lor is here, Trevor Maloney's here. If Nemo gets out of the car to go and ride with Black, the space to be filled is that seat there. There's no evidence that he was breathing down Bridget's neck. There's no evidence that he made any threats. There's no evidence that he was physical or said anything of an intimidating manner. He's sitting in the back seat. All we know that's going on in that car is what Bridget tells us. What the state told you, listen to the evidence, because what the state told you is that Black called Nya. Exhibit 22. 2:10:33 seconds. On the drive to the quarry, Bridget receives a call from Black. That's the evidence that the state put in on exhibit number 22. 2:10:35 seconds. Bridget receives a call from Black. And maybe it was just a mix-up. Maybe there's a lot of facts, and you need to rely upon your memory of the facts. But what I think is undisputed is there's no call between Black and Nya. Bridget never says that. There's no phone records about that. All of the evidence, including the phone records, is Black calls and speaks with Bridget. All right? What happens during that conversation? We're reliant upon what Bridget says. But we know it's not what the state said. And the state says that Black and Nya are calling each other, because that's not the evidence. She gets a call. She'd already agreed to follow Black. She's in her own car. She can drive where she wants. I appreciate that she might be scared, but when the state says she's afraid there might be a gun, what evidence is there that anybody has a gun other than Black? Ever, throughout this trial. We'll get to it, all right? But Bridget's like, Black has the gun. He has the gun when she walks into Holiday Inn. He has the gun when she walks out of Holiday Inn. It's Black's gun. He brought it here. He has it. He then calls Bridget, and Bridget drives to the quarry, a road that she's familiar with. She told you that. They get to the quarry. She still is at that point under the impression this is going to be a beatdown. They get out, and she says immediately, Black goes and pistol whips Trevor. That's what she says. Black, who has the gun, now uses the gun to commit violence on one of these three boys. She sees that. And I asked her in particular, when that happened, what was Nya doing? She said he was just standing there. Her testimony was he was just standing there. I'm going to get to Nick Stulke and the impressions or the shoe prints or all of that. But that's not what Bridget says. Bridget says Nya is just standing there. She then says she sees Black take the gun, and Black order the three boys to get on their knees, order the three boys to walk, to scramble, I guess I'll call it, on their knees into the place where they end. And he orders them to empty their pockets. That's what Bridget says. That's the testimony that you heard. There is zero evidence, none, to even suggest that Nya went in and reached his hands into their pockets and told them to pull it out. The evidence from Bridget was that Black ordered that to be done. Nor was there any DNA evidence from them to say, we know that Nya's hands were on them. There's none of that. We have one story, and that's Bridget's story, and that's that Black told the boys to empty out their pockets and that they did so. That's what she says. She says she then gets into an argument with him, and he, again, for the second time that night, takes the gun, points it at her, and threatens violence. Shut up, stand there, or you're going to be down there with them. I think another time she said, he said. Another time, Bridget says, Black said, shut up, or you'll be in the trunk with them. The man with the gun is threatening her to do certain things. So let's stop it there for a moment, because that, like I said in the opening, that moment of time, what happens next, that's something that we're going to go and talk. But let's just stop it there, right? And I appreciate this is not a movie. I appreciate that this is not a book. This is not something you'd watch. But if you think about it, because the court is going to tell you the reasonable hypotheses, think through it. If it ends there, if that's where the evidence is, and it ends there, who's the shooter? Ask yourself, leading up to that, where does all the evidence point? It all points at Black. It all points at Black. There's no other reasonable explanation. The states talk to you about, I think they called Nya amongst the numerous times that she pointed at him, the state pointed at him. I get it. Fantastic lawyer, doing lots of different things here to talk to you about it. But where's the motive that Nya would have to do this to his friend? There's no motive there. Everybody agrees. Michael Vang agrees, Bridget agrees, everybody agrees that the debt owed is between Nemo and Black. If you stop it right there at that spot, right before what we're going to talk about later is the shooting, all evidence points to Black. And let's think about who are these two people, right? Because at that point, you've got Black, the alpha male. I don't think there's anything to contradict that. Somebody who uses violence and threats to dominate. That's who Black is. Remember, don't cross him, don't lie to him, he'll put his hands on you, he'll hurt women. She says he's violent. We heard from Mr. Weckler, he's unpredictable. We heard from Mr. Weckler through Mr. Yurgis, excuse my language, but he's a fucking piece of shit. That's what Weckler had told Yurgis. That's who Black is. Black, the man who speaks with Mr. Leinfelder later, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Compare that to who's the other person? Nya Thao. What's the evidence you have about Nya Thao? The state's agreed. They've conceded. They're like, he's the nice one, right? What is the evidence that we heard from the stand? When asked to describe him 12 hours after the shooting, Bridget said, he's short, bald, kind of quiet. When asked to describe Black, who talks to Mr. Leinfelder, when asked to describe Black, violent, unpredictable, don't cross him, he'll hurt women. And what else do we know about Black compared to Nya? She said, she agreed, she told the police, she's never seen Nya be violent. Never heard him threaten anybody, and in fact, never once threatens her. The extent of what we hear him say to her is, you're a good friend. We can talk about that eventually, why he may have said that. What does that mean? But when you compare, who's the shooter? Black, the violent, unpredictable man, the bald, short, kind of quiet guy. And we know that in that moment, at the quarry, when we're standing in and it's paused, as I pause the story, we know that Black has been up for days. We heard that from Mr. Leinfelder, that Black had told him he was high, he was tweaking, he'd been up for days. We heard that somebody who's high, tweaking, up for days could be paranoid, and we know Black told that to Mr. Leinfelder, he was paranoid. And we know that he could be hallucinating. Those are uncontested. That's what the evidence is about who Black is as a character, and what was he in that moment. Angry, pissed, and so high he's tweaking and paranoid. And in that moment, I ask you, because the judges told you, right? How do you analyze the evidence? Jury instruction 140. You can go to your pages if you want. Jury instruction 140, let me just make sure. On page 13 of 26, if you can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypotheses consistent with Nya's innocence, you must do so and find him not guilty. That story from Bridget driving, getting to the quarry, and where we pause right there, that's Black is the shooter. That's a reasonable hypothesis that has not been controverted. I'm going to get to what Bridget says in this little sliver of time. So up until then, if you pause the story, all evidence points to Black being the shooter. Then you pick up after that. What do we know then? We know Bridget is alive, right? Bridget's standing there and she's alive. We know that she's here. She says that she's here. And that's the feeling. I know it's obvious, and attorneys sometimes say obvious things, but that's just what I gathered is just this overwhelming feeling of, I can't believe I'm alive. And she says, she tells you, I'm alive because Black let me live. She says, she tells you, I'm alive because Black didn't shoot me. That's what she said. 2024 Bridget told you that under oath. That's the reason she's alive. Because of the choices that Black made. Black let her live. Black didn't shoot her. Sometimes the truth reveals itself. Why, perhaps, and this is, we don't know. We don't know why Black let her live. We're never going to know why Black let her live. We're never going to know because Black, that man, that violent, unpredictable man who pled guilty to this crime, they didn't call him as a witness to answer that question. I'm going to get to why they didn't call him, but you didn't get to hear, we didn't get to ask Black, why did he not shoot her? Why did he let her live? So, take this for what it's worth, right? I don't know. I don't know why. The last person's mind that I want to get into is Cam Rattanasack. But, did he let her live because he's a manipulative narcissist? Did he let her live because he's somebody that's lived a life in where he's manipulated people in the past and he's used them to his advantage? Is he somebody that is smart enough, in a wicked way, to know he needs a patsy and he needs a witness to blame the patsy? That's the only way he's getting out of that. All right? I don't know. Maybe the state's going to come up and say that's ridiculous, that's speculation. Take it for what it's worth. But I do know this. The state didn't call Cam Rattanasack and ask him that question, so you don't have that. You don't know why he didn't shoot her. You don't know why he didn't. And as the judge told you, every fact that needs to be established, it's the burden of the state, not the defense's burden. That's on them. And if it's not answered, it's not on you. That's on them.
Okay, that's a really interesting argument. He's insinuating that the reason that Rattanasack let Bridget live and I guess didn't let Thao live, but whatever. But he's insinuating that it was so that he would have Bridget to be able to point the finger at Thao. That's a very interesting argument.
We know she's alive. We know she gets into her car and she's connected to Black. We've talked about that before. She's had an intimate relationship with him. She was intense over this short period of time. She's been with him. And now as Black drives away, she begins to distance herself from him, right? She got to get into the car. She got to get away. Now they create distance. And she continues that because when Black picks up the phone and calls her, she says no. He rejects that call. When Black picks up the phone a second time to call her, she says no. She rejects that call. There's a third call, which says at 2:41, Bridget receives call from Cam, 5 seconds in duration. She says she didn't answer it. Maybe that's voicemail. 2:42, Bridget receives call from Cam, 2 seconds in duration. Maybe that's again to voicemail and he hangs up. She tells you she doesn't answer it. These calls are rejected, right? And then what do we know happens? She says after she gets those calls from Cam, the violent man who's threatened her in the past and wants to make sure she does what he says, he needs to get that message across. He texts her and says, don't talk or else. He's a man of will who's going to say, I'm getting that message across no matter what. You don't answer my calls, I'm sending you a text. She gets that call, she gets that text, she sees it, she's aware of it. I imagine she's scared out of her mind, absolutely scared to death after what she's seen happen, after she's seen what happened when you cross that man or you lie to that man. And what we know is, even though to some extent that text from Black to her, that threat that she received, I can't even conceive of a way in which that makes her guilty of a crime. I can't conceive of a way if that's bad for her. But she deletes it. She deletes it. She deletes it all. So why would she delete that? Why would she not want anybody to know that she'd been threatened? We're going to get to that, but we know she deletes it. And then we know she picks up her phone and she punches in numbers. She calls her good friend Nya, the kind of quiet guy. And she speaks with him for 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Ask yourself, why would she call and speak with this person for 9 minutes and 30 seconds? Is there any explanation of why she would pick up the phone and want to talk to Nya other than a shared experience? A horrific, horrible, evil witnessing of a bad experience? Why else would she call Nya and talk for 9 minutes and 30 seconds? And she doesn't tell you the extent of what they were talking about. But we know he's not the shooter. They've got a shared experience that I imagine the one and only person in the world that might understand and be able to process and go through that same horrible experience with you is somebody else who was standing right there. That's what she says. He was standing right there. We know she talks to him for that 9 minutes and 30 seconds. So, if you look at that second part, right? Let's look at that. We've went through the up to the quarry. Now let's talk about post-quarry. She talks to Nya, right? And after she talks to Nya, she deletes texts. After she talks to Nya, she gets rid of the meth. After she talks to Nya, I don't know what other evidence she gets rid of, right? And I say that because the evidence is that the state collected 10 phones. And the evidence is that the state collected 2 of them from Walmart in Sturgeon Bay. There were 3 boys that were there. We don't know where that third phone was. We don't know what happened to that third phone. They didn't tell you that. Who here, when they can't find a phone, has ever called it? Maybe I'll figure out where that phone is. There's a call in there that says, Bridget Schlitt calls Trevor Malone's phone. Is she calling because she wants to see where the phone is if it's still in her back seat? And she needs to get rid of that phone just like she needs to get rid of the meth? And she doesn't tell any of us about any of that stuff. And maybe that's why Tim Marks never comes forward and talks about any of this. I don't know. I just know this. She got rid of evidence, and there's nothing about Trevor's phone. Where did that go? Why did it go there? So if we look at that second part, right, that second part, since after the shooting, and what do we know? And you look at that, and the judge is going to tell you, you need to analyze it and give, is there a reason to doubt? Who's the shooter based upon that evidence? If you just take that part of the story out and you just look at that story afterwards, who's the shooter then? I submit to you all the evidence is that it's black. It's Cam Rattanasack, the man who pled guilty to the crime. That's who it is. So if all of the evidence leading up to the shooting points to black, and all the evidence after the shooting points to black, we asked this question, but you know the answer. Like, so why are we here, right? We all know why we're here. We're here because in this sliver of time, before all of that evidence, or excuse me, after all of that evidence and before all this evidence, in this sliver of time, 13 hours or so after she witnesses this horrible event, after she slept for a couple of hours, after she got rid of some evidence, and after she lied to the police for about 3.5, 4 hours. In that sliver of time, she then makes a choice. And she says, the short, bald, quiet guy did it. And that's what we need to decide. Is that believable? Is she believable when she says that? Because we're going to talk about party to the crime. But this whole week, all last week, from the get-go till the end on Friday, all we're talking about is who's the shooter, right? That's what, when we get people up here and we're asking them questions, what's the evidence about who's the shooter? What's the evidence about who's the shooter? Because that's really the issue. Who was the shooter? That sliver of time. Let me talk about it a little bit. Now, there's this sliver that I'm going to talk about, and it all comes down to Bridget, right? Bridget is the one person who came here and says, Nya was the shooter. The law. You guys got a packet of the law here. It's 26 pages. I want to make some references to it because that's how you're going to need to analyze the evidence, right? And that's the question. The main question is, do you believe Bridget Schlick beyond a reasonable doubt? During instruction 300, which is on page 20, right? It says, it is the duty of the jury to scrutinize and weigh the testimony of witnesses. Not the duty to believe, it's the duty to scrutinize that testimony. And I'm going to go through some different things we're going to scrutinize with you. You might find that helpful, you might not. That's something that I'd ask you to do when you're back there deliberating. One of the factors that the judge is going to say to you on page 20, right? The clearness or lack of clearness of the witness's recollections, I'd ask you to that. Because when you think of Bridget, and when she was up here testifying, when I asked her questions that might scrutinize what she said, those are the times that she decided she didn't remember. Those are the times that she decided to say, oh, I'm not quite sure. Lack of clearness. Another one, the reasonableness of the witness's testimony. And I say that because I think if you look at the arc of this story, does it make any sense that Nya, the nice guy, is the shooter? Does that make any sense? And then I think mostly the last one, which we're going to get into, it's on page 21, possible motives for falsifying testimony. She told you she'd lie to protect herself. She told you that 2021 Bridget, look, all credit to her. 2024 Bridget, the Bridget that you saw, looked like somebody that's changed, right? That's grown, but she still has 2021 Bridget in her. And she even knows 2021 Bridget, that person in that time, that's just the reality of it, that person lies to protect herself. That's still a part of who she is, as much as she wants to distance herself from it. Really, a past, a part of who all of us are, right? I don't think we just don't get to like peel off our skin and become a new person. They're there. And that's a past that she lies to protect herself. What's the next, how to analyze it? On page 13, during instruction 140, talks about reasonable doubt, right? The term reasonable doubt means a doubt based upon reason and common sense. And here's what I think is the most important sense. Listen to this. It is a doubt for which a reason can be given, arising from a fair and rational consideration of the evidence or lack of evidence. A doubt for which a reason can be given. So let's talk about Bridget, and let's talk about the reasons to doubt Bridget. In sum, right? There's basically three. One is she lies to the police. She tells us that. We all know that. Two is the lies are mostly to distance herself from black, right? She's like, I want to distance myself from black. And three is the motive to falsify. She says over and over again to the police, and I asked this to Mr. Amundsen, I want to make sure you guys believe me. I'm worried that this is going to look bad, right? I'm worried that it's going to look bad. I just want to get the exact quote. I don't want you guys to think I'm lying or doing anything bad. That's what 2021 Bridget says when she's speaking with Mr. Amundsen. So do you have a reason to doubt a person who gets rid of the evidence, deletes it, right? gets rid of meth, maybe gets rid of a phone. Second, what are the actual lies that we know for sure and that she continued when she was up on that stand? 2024 Bridget continued to lie about black.
Not yet.
What were those lies? She says, first off, she doesn't mention anything to the police on the 21st, or excuse me, on the 23rd. She mentions zero to the police on the 23rd about deleting texts. And who are the texts that they're deleting from? Black, black, black. She says she deletes them all, but the one thing that she tells us that she has a memory of is the stuff with black. There's no text between her and Nya, so there's nothing to delete there. Her texts that she deleted are from black, and she lies about that to the police. She's reluctant to give her phone to the police, right? She eventually does, but she does not want to give the phone because she's afraid that it's going to not corroborate what she says. She lies about sex with black. Now, when she got up there, she says, I didn't lie, I just never told them that. You remember that? She says, I didn't lie, I just never told them that. It was never asked. And then Mr. Amundsen got up there, and Mr. Amundsen was asked some questions, and Mr. Amundsen said, no, we asked her, and she said no. So we know on the 23rd of 2021, she lied about it, and we know in 2024, when she's here, she lied about it. And maybe this lie on the 2024, maybe that was, she doesn't remember. I don't know. But I do know this. When you lie about things, harder to keep track of them, and we know she lied about it to begin with. And then you have to ask yourself, why? Why were the lies that she told when she got to the police in those first 3.5 hours, why were all the lies about black? Why, if she's going to lie, is that the lie that she tells, the lie about black? Because she wants to distance herself from black. Two reasons to distance herself from black, right? One is she knows he's the bad guy, he's the shooter.
Beth Henderson, I agree. He focused so much of his opening statements on Bridget, and now so much of his closings on her as well.
And if she slept with the shooter, and they can connect the two of them, she's worried about accessory to murder. She's worried about party to the crime. She's worried because she has a connection to black, and she needs to lie about that to do it because she's like, if he's the shooter, he is the shooter, right? She wants to distance herself from that. That's the second reason that she lies. She lies to protect herself, right? And that's both her physical well-being, meaning, look, she's there, she's talking to the police, but she's not saying who black is, even though she knows him. She's not talking about black. She's still got that threat. Don't talk or else. Don't talk or else. And what do we know that she says in those first 3.5 hours? And I know there's pronoun talk, and we talked about it, right? But when she's talking in those first 3.5 hours before she divulges whom is who is whom, who is who, I got back in the car at gunpoint because he said, get in the car, follow me. So I did it because I didn't want to get shot. These are the clips 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7 that I went through with Amundsen. She says, I didn't know going to die until he did that. I didn't know they were going to die until he did that. I seen he had the gun and he was holding it towards somebody, the older guy. He had it out the window and he said, follow me. Those are all the times that she's talking about what happened. And the he she's referring to is the older guy with the gun. And the he she refers to is, I didn't know they were going to die until he did that. He's talking about one man with a gun who's violent, unpredictable, and makes threats. She wants to distance herself from that person. That's a reason to doubt her story now. Motive to when I look at jury instruction here, 300, right? It talks about, here's one thing, possible motives for falsifying testimony. And I ask you, go in and analyze. These words are important. It does not say in the jury instruction, motive to falsify testimony. It says possible motive. I submit to you that the reason the law says you have to consider that a reason to doubt, you have to consider that a reasonable doubt, is because a possible motive is enough, whether the motive's been proven or not. A possible motive is a reason to doubt. And we know there's a possible motive for her to falsify testimony. We know that because she said so. She said when she was up here, she said, I know I have value if I keep saying the same thing. She knew that in 2021. She knows that now. She knows she's already testified under oath one time. Right? And her testimony under oath, if that changes, she's guilty of a crime. She has to stick to that same story that 2021 Bridget said. She's stuck with 2021 Bridget. And she's stuck with 2021 Bridget's story. Because the one thing, and I understand it, absolutely understand why 2024 Bridget would not want to fall back into 2021 Bridget's world. She doesn't want that. And the one way to protect herself is she has to stick to that story. If it changes, she's committing a crime. If it changes, there's reason to doubt everything she said, and for all the state may know then is, hey, why'd you lie about that? If you lied about that, are you lying because you're a party to the crime of homicide? Are you lying because you're a party to the crime of conspiracy? Were you a member of this? Did you do something? She doesn't want that responsibility. So she sticks to her story. It's the only way that she can go. She's stuck with that. And again, Lastly, what's a reason to doubt her, Bridget, about who was the shooter? Because I could definitely see myself saying that about someone after they murdered. She's talking about black, she's sitting in this chair, she's telling you, and the truth slips out. That's a reason to doubt. Oops. So, there's some talk, and I wish there was a better way for me to do it. If perhaps I was a better lawyer, or had more time, or more help, or something else, I'd be able to talk to you about all the other evidence, right? We know that there's a lot of other witnesses other than Bridget. So I want to shift into talking about some of them. And I want to talk about them in the sense of, do they corroborate anything Bridget says, right? Because the first theory, the main theory, the state's theory for the entire week is, he's the shooter. And the only evidence of that is Bridget. And we know from Mr. Langfelder that you need to corroborate, right? You need to corroborate. So what other evidence do we have? We have Nick Stolke, right? The crime scene expert. What does Nick Stolke say? He talks about there being impressions and that there's one impression that is more dominant than the other impression. Okay. How does that tell you who the shooter is? How does that corroborate anything Bridget says? You listen to the evidence. You remember the evidence about if Nick Stolke corroborates that. What the state's argument was twofold. All right? The state used Nick Stolke to come up here and say to you, Nick Stolke proved that Nya emptied their pockets. Nick Stolke proves that Nya turned the body over. That's not what Nick Stolke said. He did not say that in any way. Circumstantial evidence you can look at, jury instruction 170. That doesn't prove any of the things that they said it proves. And in fact, that doesn't corroborate what Bridget says, because Bridget didn't say that. Bridget said Black told them to empty their pockets. That's what Bridget said. Nick Stolke doesn't corroborate or contest or contradict that. That's not what Nick Stolke said. Bridget does not say, she never says that Nya flipped the body over, that he touched Peng Lor. And we know we have a crime lab. We know we have a crime lab that was there for hours. We know we have a crime lab that can collect DNA evidence, that can collect fingerprint evidence. We know all of that. We know the state has the ability to call witnesses. They have the ability to call witnesses from across the state. They have the ability to call witnesses from the crime lab. They're even willing to call witnesses that have so many red flags that their own investigator would say, eh. But what they didn't call is they didn't call anybody from the crime lab about DNA evidence. And they didn't call anybody from the crime lab about fingerprint evidence. You can, that important sentence, reasonable doubt. It is a doubt for which a reason can be given, arising from a fair and rational consideration of the evidence or lack of evidence. The state didn't call those people because they don't have evidence to support their theory. We saw all of the stuff from the wallets. There's nothing in there about anybody's DNA. There's no witness that said he did that. So why? I mean, this is a question you're going to have to ask when you're back there. Why would the state, we may get up here and tell you you need to search for the truth. It's part of the argument. I get it.
Yeah, same one.
Why would the state submit to you that Nya reached his hands into those pockets and that he flipped the body over when there's no evidence that shows that? There's not even circumstantial evidence of that. That's not what Bridget says. That's not what Nick Stolke says. That's not what any of the other evidence supports. That's quite a leap from saying that somebody's impressions are over there a lot, to say you know what those impressions mean. In fact, I even asked Nick Stolke, you don't know who the shooter was? Like, I don't know. I asked him, is it reasonable to say like somebody could be walking all around and the other person have a gun? Sure. Let me ask you this. Take your personal experience. If somebody is a leader, if somebody is the dominant person, and somebody has a gun, are they the ones that are most likely to just stand there in their sense of confidence and strength? So somebody else is walking around more. There's also evidence that the footprints are on the other side of the gate. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. I have no idea. If you're to believe the state, it means Nya Thao was inside the gate, away from the bodies, away from everybody else. Can you imagine a world in which the man with the gun goes over into the gate and those three just stay there? No, the man with the gun was standing there. The man with the gun is Black. Nick Stolke does not support the state's theory. Potentials, possibles, not beyond a reasonable doubt. What do we have after Nick Stolke? We have Michael Vang, right? And we know Michael Vang says the one thing about motive. You're going to be instructed about motive. He says that debt is between
Michael Vang is the one that goes by Bam or Bambo.
Nemo Yang and Black. Undisputed. There's no evidence that there's a debt. I can get to some of it. The debt is, from Bridget says, is between Nemo and Black, and from Michael Vang says it's between Nemo and Black. The state has some Facebook messages about some other debit card missing or something else happening on some other day. There's no time where there's messages from Nya that says, give me my money. He's basically saying, you owe Black money, give Black his money. There's no motive evidence from Michael Vang, right? It's actually contradictory. There's Facebook evidence that doesn't overcome the testimony that Black was the one that had the motive and Black was the one with the debt to collect. That's what the sworn testimony was there. The timeline, I think, is important. There's the timeline of these texts in the Facebook messages. There's some texts between Nya and Nemo. The first ones are July 10th, 2 weeks before.
Do you think that maybe that is part of the reason why there was a hung jury the first time? Because it was Black that is the one who was actually owed the money, allegedly, by Nemo? Like, it was Black that thought that Nemo had stolen money from him, and maybe that's why it was a hung jury, or part of it?
He's talking about somebody else saying he ain't playing games. July 11th, him saying he tripped. Nia talking about Black. And then the next text is on July 20th. We need new tires. There's no threats in there. He's not doing, the state got up here and said, Nia's doing the dirty work. Tell me where the dirty work is in these texts. We need new tires. Excuse me, he need new tires. Not we, he need new tires. And I say that because that's on July 20th. And some of the other texts that the state, again, these are Facebook messages, I call them texts, I apologize. What happened before that? July 16th, there's these messages to Chinoa Dawn, right? That's 3 days before he has a message to Nemo. And this is where he's asking Chino Dawn, maybe Nemo has my credit card or my debit card, right? That's on the 16th. Then we know sometime on the 18th or 19th is when he's talking to Nicole and he asks her about send this message to Nemo. But we know after that, he speaks to Nemo. He speaks to Nemo on July 20th when he says he need new tires. There's all kinds of conversations, and there's nothing that tells that I submit to you that says that they weren't in any other way talking on the phone or talking as human beings have known to talk to each other over and over again in person. Because we know this, on July 20th and on July 21st, Black is with Bridget at the Baymont Hotel. They're hanging out. They have sex. So they're all there. How does Black have sex with Bridget at that hotel and they're not around this other group of Michael Vang and Nemo? That's circumstantial evidence to consider. Did something change? I don't know. But we know Black was there. What other evidence do we have? Todd Weckler. Does he say anything to support the state's theory? He says Black is violent, unpredictable, and a fucking piece of shit. Right? And that's confirmed by Jay Yurgis, who says, yep, that's what he said. Todd Weckler does not say at any point that Nya Thao was there. Could it have been Nia? I don't know. What we know is Nia's arrested in Wausau. And what we know is Cam is in Algoma. Does it make sense that Nia would have went to Algoma and then came back to Wausau? Does that make any sense? That makes no sense. We know that Cam was arrested with another person who was driving the car. And it wasn't Nia, because Nia's in Wausau. So who's this person that Todd Weckler sees in Algoma? Hey, we don't know. Nobody's ever said. Where's Virginia Creel? Where's Cam? If it was Nia, why don't they call those witnesses to say, yeah, it was Nia, I saw him? Why wouldn't Virginia Creel have been called as a witness? Why wouldn't Cam Rattanasack Black been called as a witness to say, yep, he was with me there in Algoma? What they have is they have a piece of paper with his name on it. Okay. Is that circumstantial evidence? I suppose. Does it prove that he was there? Beyond a reasonable doubt. There's one piece of paper with his name on it in a trash can that's not in the same place as the clothes is. It's not in the same place as the gun evidence is. It's not in the same place with any of that stuff. What does that prove? I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities. I don't think it proves anything beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what we know from Todd Weckler. That's what we know about that letter. Todd Weckler said it was Cam's stuff. We know Cam said it was his gun. Does it make sense that the gun stuff was Cam? Somebody said it was. Cam said it was? Absolutely. That's what that witness tells us. And that essentially leaves us with Flora Johnson and Michael Luco, right? Those are the other witnesses that the state has brought to you. Now, Flora Johnson came here and says she knows the three boys. She knows those three boys and that she saw she saw Nia with a gun sometime before that. She can't describe the gun, she doesn't say when it is, particular. That's what we have. And we know she's connected to Michael Luco. So let's just take a moment, all right? I have to talk about Michael Luco. And again, I hope you understand, 2024 version of human beings may have made amazing progress. But what you need to decide is what was said to the police back in 2021. Are there possible motives for that? So what did we go through with Mr. Luco? We know he was in quarantine, right? I talked about it. I had this timeline. He was in quarantine in early August. He's in a cell. Nia's in a cell. Michael Caine is in a cell, right? And they're in the cell, I think, in early August. At some point, Michael Luco gets out of quarantine and he goes over to E Block. And in E Block, you're not in quarantine anymore. You get to mingle about. You get to hang out. And who else is in E Block? Black is in E Block, right? We know Black is in E Block. And after Michael Luco is in E Block with Black, right? Black, who has knowledge of what his gun looks like. Black, who has knowledge of what he did. Black, who has knowledge of who else is involved. Black has all of that knowledge. And after Luco is with that man who has that knowledge, who we know is an alpha male, who we know is dominant, who we know is violent and threatening, after that, that's when Luco talks to an investigator. Not Leinfelder first, right? He talks to Black's investigator. Use your common sense. How would that happen? Black talks to his lawyer hires an investigator gets sent down there to do that, the investigator goes to talk to him, the investigator then calls either the district attorney or Mr. Leinfelder and says, we got some stuff that's going to help us out, please go and do the work for us. So then Mr. Leinfelder goes down there and does his work because he's diligent and he does that kind of stuff. But when he goes there, he's skeptical. He doesn't have jury instruction 300 like you guys do, but he still scrutinizes testimony, and he told you there's all kinds of red flags that are going on. All kinds of red flags because he knows he's in a cell with Cam Rattanasack. And after he speaks with him, he's like, I got to corroborate this. Because essentially he doesn't say that, but read between the lines because you're just not believable on your own. The way that this is set up, there's no way that I can't even believe you. I got to go and corroborate it. So what does he do? He says, all right, Michael Caine. He's somebody that's in this cell back here with the three of them, right? Does Michael Caine corroborate what Michael Luco says? Excuse me, Caine Moss. I misspoke. Apologize. Caine Moss was the person that was in that cell with him. Does Caine Moss corroborate Michael Luco? No. We heard that from Mr. Leinfelder. He told a different story.
Objection, facts not in evidence.
Argument, Judge. The jury can listen to the evidence as you want. What I heard is he told a different story.
Overruled. Let me just get it. All right, go ahead.
Sorry. He told a different story. And what was Caine Moss's story? I don't know. The state didn't call him. If Caine Moss has anything to corroborate Michael Luco or to support their case, you know they would have called him. She's an excellent lawyer. You're not going to see a lawyer as good as this. She's called all of the witnesses. And we know if that would have helped him, she'd have called them. You can use that. The lack of evidence is something you can consider. So when we test Luco's evidence, it fails with Caine Moss. And then what we know is, we know Leinfelder goes back and he talks to him, to Luco, and he says to Luco, I spoke with Bennett Mental Health, and Bennett Mental Health doesn't say what you said. His notes don't corroborate it. He doesn't have those things to do that. You didn't say that to him. And we know Luco, in that moment in time when I was asking Leinfelder about that, I went through several times with the transcript of the recording about that. And we know when I asked Mr. Leinfelder about that, he agreed that Luco then changed his story. He was tested and he failed, and they still called him. If Bridget's believable beyond a reasonable doubt, you call Michael Luco? You ask that story to be believed beyond a reasonable doubt if Bridget's believable beyond a reasonable doubt? I don't know. That's something you guys have to decide. That brings us to who's the witness we didn't hear from, right? Who should have been, who sat here, spoke with Mr. Leinfelder, and we know he told Mr. Leinfelder several things when he was arrested. He told him he was pissed. He told him he was angry. He told him he was high. He told him he was tweaking. He told him he was paranoid. And he told him it was his gun. We know that's what Black said. We also know Black said guilty. The stipulated fact. Judicial notice, he entered a guilty plea to first-degree intentional homicide as a party to the crime. Now, we're going to get through party to the crime. There's three ways in which somebody can be guilty of party to the crime. They can directly commit it. They can aid and abet somebody. They can do it as a conspiracy, right? If Black is going to get up on that stand and say somebody else shot, you think they would have called him? Absolutely. Absolutely. What we know is if you can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypotheses consistent with the evidence, you must do so. Party to the crime, three possibilities. He's the shooter, he aided somebody, he's a conspiracy. Reasonable hypotheses, he came into this court said the words guilty, got life imprisonment, and can't even petition to get out until he's in his 80s. Is that a reasonable hypothesis that has been presented to you that is uncontradicted, in which he is basically saying, I did it, I'm a shooter? I submit to you it is. It's not contradicted in any way. They've got no evidence. Why didn't they call him? Why don't you get to hear from Cam Rattanasack? Why, if you're searching for the truth and you really want to know who's responsible, who's culpable, why don't you call the man who pled guilty and got life? Why don't they want you to hear from him? The end of jury instruction 140, there's a section that says you are to search for the truth. And if the state gets up here and they say to you, we're here to search for the truth, ask them, why didn't you call Cam? Why didn't you let us to hear that? And if they say, well, Mr. Nelson could have called him, sure, I agree. I can call witnesses, but I have no burden. We went through that to begin with. We have zero burden. Zero burden. Every fact necessary is upon the state. And we went through that in voir dire. If they don't bring something, that's not on you, and it ain't on me. And what I think we can use is our reason and our common sense to ask, why would the state, with all of their resources, their excellence, why would they not call them? I think there's really only one answer. He's the shooter. Everything leading up to it, he's the shooter. Everything afterwards, he's the shooter. That sliver in time, so many reasons to doubt what Bridget Schlicht says. First of which is her own words, right? Her own words when she says, I could definitely see myself saying that about someone after they murdered. So, is there reasonable doubt as to who the shooter is? Yes, absolutely. I think if it's more likely than not, which isn't the burden, but if you had to decide more likely or not, who's the shooter right now, literally right now, if you in your mind were like, probably black, that's reasonable doubt. If you had to pause or to hesitate to figure out who's the shooter, that's not guilty. As the judges told you when you're analyzing the evidence, if you can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypotheses consistent with Nya's innocence, you must do so and vote not guilty. So that leads us to party to the crime. And I apologize, I don't have it up on the screen for you. But if you go through your jury instructions, and if you don't now, that's fine, you can go through them later. But these words are incredibly important, right? And I know I may have overstayed my welcome today. I'm talking, I apologize. I want to make sure maybe you already get it. I only get this one chance to get up here and talk. Once I go sit down in that chair and I sit next to the quiet man, Nya, I don't get to stand up again and say anything to you. No matter what they say, I got to shut up. So I need to go through these with you. If you could just bear with me. This is the law. And as the judges said, we'll tell you, right? Keep your duties steadfastly in mind. And your duty is to follow the law. So I have to talk about it. I'm a lawyer doing my lawyer thing. Please bear with me. Party to the crime, right? We know there's the three ways. I talked about the first. Intentionally aiding or abetting. Here's the parts that the state didn't tell you about on page 3. To intentionally aid and abet first-degree intentional homicide, Nya Thao must have known that another person is committing or intends to commit the crime of first-degree intentional and have the purpose to assist the commission of that crime. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he had knowledge and purpose to commit that crime. Now, I get it. You can get up here and talk about Teebs, or you can talk about all these other things, but what's their actual evidence that Nya Thao had knowledge that someone was going to get shot? We didn't hear from Cam. There's no plan. Nobody talks about that there's knowledge. There's nothing inside. What we know is Michael Vang, who's got a view of this, he says he thinks there's going to be a beatdown. And we know this. We know Bridget Schlicht. They want you to believe her They want you to believe her beyond a reasonable doubt. And what has she said? She says over and over and over on the July 23rd, 2021, I thought there was just going to be a beatdown. I thought that they were just going to get a beatdown. I thought someone was going to get beat up. I thought they were going to get hit and leave. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. And remember, she has knowledge. She saw a man point a gun at somebody else and order them to get into her car. She saw the man use the gun to pistol whip somebody. She saw that man, that older man with the gun, point it at somebody herself and threaten her. And she says, I didn't know there was going to be a shooting until he did that. He being black. That's what she says. That's what the evidence is. What's the evidence of specific knowledge? Because they need to prove that. Later on, the jury instruction on page 11, there's a definition about knowledge. You cannot look into a person's mind to find knowledge. Knowledge must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts words or statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon knowledge. What is the knowledge that they claim? It's speculation. It's a theory. Their theory is he must have known. Their theory is they're friends. That's not evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a theory. What's the tangible evidence? There's nothing in any of these texts about a gun or about shooting or about death or about killing. Nothing. Zero. There's no threats that anybody told you that Nya Thao made to anybody at any time. Party to a crime. That's what they need. Oh, I lost my cards. So, if we're going to talk about, again, intentional, right? That's one of the words that they said about knowledge and intent. And then as we get into the intent later, as the judge tells you, on each one of the 3 counts on page 6 and 7, they need to prove that Nya Thao directly or as a party to the crime with Black acted with the intent to kill Nemo. And then it defines intent to kill. They need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt means that Nya Thao had the mental purpose to take the life of another, or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death of another human being. What of his conduct that we're talking about, right? There's all kinds of evidence of this evil, violent man. There's nothing about the quiet one. That's what they need to bring to you. And I say that because you're required to give him the benefit of every reasonable doubt. And I hope we all agree with that in concept. Because we've seen in this case how that, maybe I'll call it a gift, how that gift can be given to another human being like Bridget. She's given the benefit of the doubt. When she says, I thought it was going to be a beatdown, they gave her the benefit of that doubt. When she deletes texts and throws away evidence, they gave her the benefit of that doubt. Why? Why does she get it? She's not here on trial. Nya Thao gets it, right? Aid, he didn't do anything to aid. We know she drove them there. You're just talking about sheer, not knowledge, not intent, just actual aid. She drove them there. That's aiding. And I'm not saying we should charge her with a crime. I am not saying that by any means. But what I'm saying is you got to look at her, and you have to consider Nya in the same way. Even if he's a different gender and a race, you need to consider him in the same way. How else do you look at it? The state talks to you about this after the fact. They made a big deal of after the fact the gun, right? The gun is found on the side of the road, right? Let me just submit 2 things about that. One is you get to use your life experience. Absolutely, you get to use your life experience. I don't know. We don't know. There's not evidence as to how that gun got onto the side of the road. They didn't call Cam. They didn't bring any fingerprints. They didn't bring any DNA. How does that gun get onto the side of the road? Look, I'm not a gun guy. I don't have a gun. But I've driven a car before. And when I'm driving it, I know even on the driver's side, there's a button I can push that makes the passenger side window go down. And while I may not be proud of it, have I thrown an apple core out the passenger side window when I'm driving a car? Yep, done that.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm not trying to make light of it, but it's absolutely positively possible for somebody in the driver's seat to chuck something out the passenger side window. Simple. I'm guessing half of you have done it yourselves. Don't want me to project my own flaws onto you, but maybe, right? How is their theory that that means Nya did it? Proof beyond a reasonable doubt? And then let's take a step back and let's unpack that. How is that even proof after the fact? How is after the fact proof of him knowing things beforehand? It's not. If you look at that, she was talking about it under consciousness of guilt, jury instruction 172, right? That needs to prove actual guilt. They don't know who threw the gun out. They don't know why they threw the gun out. And it says nothing about the prior time, about what that person knew beforehand, right? Their logic would be, well, Bridget threw away the meth and deleted the text afterwards, so she clearly must have known that there was going to be an intentional shooting. No. They've told you no. That's not how it went. So how is it different for Nya Thao? He gets the benefit. We're in this.
I think it seems like the reason he's so fixated on Bridget in his openings and his closings, not only because she's the witness who's telling the jury that she saw Thao actually shoot the boys, but I think because if you notice, he keeps comparing her role in it to Thao's role in it. And I think that it's maybe making that comparison of like, well, she drove them there, but isn't charged. So if he was just there, he shouldn't be charged either. It seems like he's trying to like make that comparison to give the jury some kind of reasonable doubt. Like if, you know, by almost like by comparing Bridget and Thao, it's saying like if she, you know, if we're going to believe what she says and she gets reasonable doubt, then, or the benefit of the doubt, then he should too. I mean, it's an interesting argument.
This room, we're in this sacred place where we're asked steadfastly, follow your duty. Keep that in mind. And then we talked about the bystander, right? A person does not aid and abet if he is only a bystander or a witness and does nothing to assist the commission of the crime charged. That's the law. I appreciate that lawyers get up here and make arguments about why we think the law is the way it is. And the state made an argument about the purpose of what that law is. All I know is it's the law. And the law says that somebody who's a witness, who doesn't know about that specific crime, because that's what this talks about later, right? On page 4, with the intent that the specific crime be committed for the purpose of committing that crime. Not the crime of a beatdown, not the crime of a kidnapping, not whatever other crime they want to do, but with the intent that the specific crime be committed, and for the purposes of committing that crime.
That's it. We froze. That's a big thing I was thinking about too, Donna Barry.
They have to prove knowledge.
She went to the police.
And at the end of the day, they didn't. And I submit to you, the reason they didn't is because the knowledge didn't exist. If that evidence existed, if there was knowledge, I think the evidence would exist. And if that evidence existed, this team, this excellent team, they would have brought it to you. And they didn't, because it's not there, because it doesn't exist, because he didn't know about it. He's not a party to that crime. And that's where we get into this same thing with the conspiracy, right? And I submit to you this. When a violent sociopath who's tweaking on meth has a gun, there's only bystanders and victims. That's it. When a sociopath like that has a gun, all that's left are bystanders and victims. Same thing for the party to the crime regarding conspiracy. Again, they need to show that there was an actual plan, a specific plan. If there was a plan, I would submit to you that you would have heard from Cam Rattanasack. But that man who spoke to Mr. Leinfelder wasn't called. He wasn't called because he wasn't going to help him. And he wasn't going to help him because the truth is there wasn't a plan. And he's got no reason to say anything other than guilty, which he did say. Guilty because he did it. And then lastly, on party to the crime, as we go through here, directly committed it, aided and abetted, or conspiracy. No matter which theory they pick, it needs to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Before you may find Nya Thao guilty, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that he either directly committed it, intentionally aided and abetted, or was a member of a conspiracy. These other two theories, this aiding and abetting, this party to the crime, that doesn't lessen proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's still beyond a reasonable doubt. And we all know we were here for a week, right? You had to listen to me for longer than you probably ever wanted to, including right now. But in that week, we know that all of the issues were about who's the shooter. This other stuff that they're now trying to switch to, I submit to you it's because there's a reason to doubt who's the shooter. And if there's a reason to doubt Bridget on who's the shooter, there's a reason to doubt. As I talked to you before, well, let me say this one more. Consciousness of guilt instruction, right? Jury instruction 172. Consciousness of guilt is not, as it says in there, you still must see, is it evidence of actual guilt, right? Because they want to say, look, he was in Wausau and he wore a wig. Okay, I get it. How is that really any different than Bridget? Bridget didn't show up right away. Bridget didn't tell the truth. What we know is Nya Thao didn't lie. Nya Thao entered a not guilty plea. She got rid of evidence. She drove around for a while. She lied to the police. And they want to say his being in Wausau, wearing a wig with his name tattooed across his arm, is consciousness of guilt? Maybe. Or maybe he was worried about the same thing Bridget was, and that is What did she say to Amundsen? I'm worried you guys are going to think this looks bad, right? Something along those lines. I've lost all of my cards. I'm worried about how this is going to look. You don't think a short, quiet, Hmong man living in America might be worried about the same things? And then his journal, right? They talk about his journal and they want to say that that's consciousness of guilt. What we know is Bridget went to the police on the 23rd of July. Many, many days later, don't know if it was specifically said, I think it was on the 26th, maybe the 28th, Nya was arrested in Wausau. In those 72 hours, would somebody in Nya Thao's position be able to watch the news and see that a witness came forward and blamed him? Absolutely, right? They didn't say he went off to someplace where there was no contact with the world. He was in Wausau. They have internet there. They have news channels there. He was certainly able to see. It's in that time when he could have written the journal. Why is Bridget blaming me? Right? It's out there in the world. That's how he knows, because he sees it on the news. And when he sees it on the news, he's aware she's blaming him. And he wonders, why? Why would she blame me? And then he starts doing the best that he can and writing some thoughts down. And what we know he does after that is he enters a not guilty plea. We know there's a world in which Michael Vang lives. And that he told you about that world and where he said, if you don't get them, we will. A world of what I think he was saying was street justice. In that world, somebody doesn't get the benefit of the doubt. In that world, they don't have due process, they don't have judges, they don't have juries. I think we're all thankful for this world. And it is a duty. It's a duty that the judge is going to say, hold steadfastly in your mind. But that's what makes the world we live in, the world we want to live in, not that street justice world. In this world, in this courthouse, they need to bring the evidence. Doesn't matter how good your attorneys are, doesn't mean how many people they have on that side, it's about the evidence. And they don't have the evidence because he's not the shooter. There's reasons to doubt because he's not the shooter. You can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypotheses. Consistent with his innocence, you must do so. And like I said before, I'm not going to get a chance to come back up here and talk to you. When I sit down here in a couple of minutes, I'm done. It'll be your duty to scrutinize the testimony. And I'd ask that you not only give Nya Thao the benefit of the doubt, but when you hear the state's rebuttal, think to yourself, what would Mr. Nelson say? What would I say if I had a chance to rebut to that? You perhaps could get into my head a little bit at this point. What would be the response to that? Amongst yourselves, you can think of that. Because when you go back there and you deliberate, you find that there is a reason to doubt. And I'd ask that you do your duty. And even if, right, that's a difficult duty, what the judge tells you at the end here, and this is what I worry about in the rebuttal because we saw some of that before, this is a heart-wrenching case. I get that. There is extreme loss that has occurred in this case. And what the judge will tell you, you will not be swayed by sympathy, prejudice, or passion. I've done my best to give you the reasons to doubt. I ask you to do your duty, follow the law. And if you follow the law, he's not guilty.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, the state has the burden of proof as indicated. They have the right to rebuttal. I was going to go move forward unless somebody needs a break. We're going to hopefully be done at around 12:30. That's my hope. We'll go from there. Go ahead.
All right. So this is the final time that the prosecution addresses the jury.
Talking a lot today. It's our toxic trait, isn't it? A lot of speculation going on. A lot of speculation going on about evidence. And of course, Mr. Nelson has come up before you and he said, hey, there's a lot of reasonable doubt as long as everybody's lying and you don't believe what anything says. A lot of speculation about all of that. A couple of things. One, counsel mentioned when the state picks its theory out of the three party to a crime. Ladies and gentlemen, I pick all three. I pick all three. That's why it's party to a crime. I do not need to pick one of them, and neither do you. That's why unanimous agreement is not required. All 12 jurors do not have to agree whether Nya Thao directly committed, intentionally aided and abetted, or is a member of a conspiracy.
I think that's an important fact.
Counsel said all of last week, the question for all of last week was who's the shooter? That's what we were all focused on. That's what counsel was focused on. That's what he was focused on. That's not what I was focused on. I was focused on 3 ways to commit a crime as a party to a crime. I was focused on the conspiracy, aiding and abetting, and directly committing.
Okay, that is probably the most important thing that she could have said to the jury, because remember, this whole time, the defense attorney has been focused on Black being the shooter, and that is that she just said is the most important part, because he's not being charged with being the trigger man. He's being charged with taking part in it, which could be either any of those 3 things, which doing it himself, the conspiracy to do it, or aiding and abetting. So that part right there to me is, while there may be, to some of them based on the defense's arguments, there may be some reasonable doubt as to whether or not he was the trigger man. Some people may doubt it, some might not, whatever. But as far as that part goes, but the aiding and abetting and the conspiracy and all of that, I think that you can't really get out of that part, because remember, he jumped in the car with Bridget and rode with them out there. And as far as aiding and abetting, you know, he's not the one who went to the police, Bridget is. So I think that that part destroys most of the defense's argument, in my opinion. Y'all can tell me what you think.
My apologies, these get a bit disjointed sometimes. We have a question about how the gun, the .40 caliber Glock, got to the side of the road, and counsel said, well, we don't know how it got to the side of the road. We don't know how it got there. I think we do. I think we know someone threw it there. I don't think a carrier pigeon flew through the Mercedes-Benz, picked up the gun, deposited it on the side of the road. I think we know exactly how it got there. And maybe Mr. Nelson throws apple cores across a car out the passenger window. My aim's not that good. Not in a moving car, not when I'm driving, not when I'm fleeing a homicide. Mr. Nelson said, let's consider Bridget Schlicht and Nya Thao in the same way. Okay, so Bridget Schlicht left a homicide, drove back to a location where she knew there were cameras, out of exhaustion, fell asleep in her car, took steps to save herself, got rid of drugs. She's a drug addict. One doesn't take drugs to a police station. And ultimately went to the police. Spent 11 hours talking to them. Mr. Thao got in a car, drove across the state of Wisconsin, dumped a gun, dumped evidence, made his way to Wausau wearing a wig and a baseball cap. Let's absolutely consider them in the same way. These 2 things are not the same. Speculation, speculation, speculation. Maybe Bridget Schlicht called Trevor's phone trying to look for it. She's seen a man shot in the temple, but she's looking for his phone. That's why she's calling. That's speculation. That's not what she told you she did about that. There's no reason to doubt her on that point. Mr. Rattanasack is violent. We've now heard he's a sociopath, apparently. I don't know where that came from. We've heard that he's a bad guy. He's a mean guy. He can do violent things. Absolutely. Now he's a sociopath. He's tweaking. He's high. What are we going to come up with next? What all is Black doing? Sometimes he's cold and calculated and getting everybody ready for an execution. And other times he's just tweaking out and hallucinating paranoid. Well, this isn't Burger King, and you can't have it both ways.
Oh.
Which one is it? And of course, it can't be Mr. Thao because he's quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, quiet can be scary too. Quiet can be terrifying. We have a lot of discussion about, well, you know what, maybe it's not a movie, but if we pretend like it's a movie and we stop it right here at this point, let's stop the tape. Let's stop. And if you had to guess at that point who the shooter would be, let's guess. Let's speculate at that point. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to just end the tape and then guess. That's not what you do. Let's think about the evidence and then stop it right before it's important and make a guess. And that's it. Let's just end it there. We don't do that. Look at everything. Think about the entire course of conduct. Speculate about DNA and fingerprints. It's interesting. Usually when you've got the facts, you argue the facts. When you've got the law, you argue the law. And when you have neither, you argue the investigation. The DNA and the fingerprints. Aha. DNA and fingerprints connect people to a crime. So Jessica Crawford told us she's not even a DNA or a fingerprint person, but counsel wanted to use her for that point. So sure. Well, we already know who's involved. What do DNA and fingerprints tell us that we don't already know? another shooter on the grassy knoll. There's no circumstantial evidence to show that Mr. Lor was turned over or that the men didn't go through their pockets or touch their things. No circumstantial evidence. Peng Lor didn't flip himself over onto his back after he'd been shot. I think there's pretty good circumstantial evidence that those men were involved with that. There's a million chevrons all around their bodies. What are the chevrons doing? Just getting up close? Just walking up to the dead bodies and just getting a good look? Nya Thao has no motive. He has no motive, except he's on Facebook in the days and weeks before. Nemo took my debit card. It's all I've got. It's my mission. Nemo, the one that I know, I grew up with around here, that Nemo grew up with around here. Black says, I don't want your money, I want his life. This execution, ladies and gentlemen, it's not about restitution. It's not as simple as money or debt. It's about atonement. That's why these boys end up dead. They have to atone for their sins. They have to atone for stealing from people you don't steal from. They have to atone for lying to people you don't lie to. Started off counsel's argument about how I had said that Black called Mr. Thao and I got that wrong and this, that, and the other. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said that Black and Nya Thao were talking on the phone together. We heard from Bridget. Black called her phone. He's correct about that. Said, wanted to talk to Nya Thao, wanted to talk to Kush. She handed the phone back. Just said that they were talking on the phone. Is that a fact up for debate? But counsel twists my words, like he did with Bridget Schlicht. I'm strong enough to be able to get here before you and correct that record. Bridget Schlicht, with her history and her background, Bridget Schlicht's not as strong as me.
Spicy.
Motives for Bridget Schlicht and Michael Lugo to lie. A couple of things about that. I cannot address all of that, but I want to bring out a few important points about that. Number one, if they're going to lie, isn't the easy lie to distance Mr. Rattanasack from everything? Isn't the easy lie to say, it was Nya Thao, it was always Nya Thao, Nya Thao did it all, Nya Thao's a violent person, Nya Thao pistol whipped Trevor, Nya Thao did this, Nya Thao did that, Cam Rattanasack's the nice quiet guy. That's the easy lie. Michael Lugo and Bridget Schlicht, are they the sort of frankly sophisticated people that would come up with that kind of a sophisticated situation he's talking about? Or do people like that tell the easy lie? And of course for Bridget Schlicht, and to an extent Mr. Lugo, the easiest lie is the lie you don't even tell. Sit there, stand there, and you shut your mouth. The easy lie for Bridget Schlicht, after seeing something horrific, is to sit in her car, drive herself home to Vernon County, and never tell a soul. That's what you do. That's the ultimate self-preservation. What is the state hiding by not calling Khamthaneth Rattanasack? They didn't bring Khamthaneth Rattanasack to court. They're hiding things. No, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't call Black to the stand. Number one, I didn't promise you in opening statements that I would. Counsel did.
Oh.
Number two, no, I do not make it my practice as an attorney, as an assistant attorney general, as an officer of the court.
Objection, personal stories of the evidence. You don't.
Sustained. Go ahead.
Why would the state call a man convicted of murder party to a crime to testify? Why do we have any reason to think Khamthaneth Rattanasack is going to do anything other than lie? For who? For what? I don't know. Sticking a fork in him, he's done. He entered a plea.
Okay, this is really funny because the jury doesn't know that in the previous trial they did call him. So, you know, we were wondering why they didn't call him back to the stand this time, and she's telling us now why, that there's no reason for them to believe that he'll do anything but lie when he gets up there. That's really interesting because she's saying he'll get up there and lie. And remember on the stand, we heard in that one article from the journalist who was in the courtroom, they said that he got up there and was saying that, oh, I was just in there making my playlist. I was just trying to create a playlist to listen to. And then all of a sudden he shot them. which obviously nobody believed that. So, so that's interesting.
He's in prison. He's done. Goodbye, Mr. Rattanasack. We don't want to hear from you anymore. I think what the evidence is clear about Mr. Rattanasack is that he will commit violence, but he does not necessarily commit violence for violence sake. Khamthaneth Rattanasack is a user. Black is a user. He uses people. He'll use violence to get what he wants, but he uses people. He used Virginia Creel for her car. He used Virginia Creel for her money. He used Virginia Creel's house to dump evidence, to hang out after this homicide. Khamthaneth Rattanasack used Bridget for sex. He used Bridget to transport the boys. And then he used the defendant to do the dirty work of the actual killing. And finally, on the point of Khamthaneth Rattanasack, the quote-unquote sociopath, I want to talk about this motive to lie and what I think of as the great Khamthaneth Rattanasack master plan for world domination. Using Bridget Schlicht and Michael Luco to lie, to apparently get him off the hook, make him seem not guilty, not culpable, not responsible. Using them in a manner that I can only describe as, hey guys, don't tell anyone, but if you do, tell them I was there, I pistol whipped someone into submission, I forced men onto their knees, I made them crawl into position to be executed. Tell them all of these things. This master intimidator, this manipulator, this narcissist, sociopath, what other words did counsel come up with? This man who is apparently so scary and manipulative that he can get multiple people to lie to make him seem super duper incredibly guilty. So guilty that he pleads guilty. First-degree intentional homicide is a party to a crime, goes to prison for at the very least 35 years when he's in his 80s. That didn't seem to have gone very good for him at all, did it? Michael Luco and Bridget Schlicht. Ladies and gentlemen, when I think about Michael Luco, and especially when I think about Bridget Schlicht in this case, and I think about who Bridget was on July 23rd, 2021, I think about what she went through that day, and I think about what she's been through since then, and I think about what she went through in that chair last week. Makes me think of a quote. Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. And her voice shook. And counsel tried mightily to blow her down, shake that truth from her. But the truth came out loud and clear. She was very clear on who she saw shoot that gun, who she saw put a bullet in Trevor Maloney's temple. Counsel tried to rattle her and tie her up in knots. That truth rang out clear and true. She spoke the truth of what she saw happen. She spoke the truth of what she saw happen to Nemo Yang, Peng Lor, and Trevor Maloney. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's your turn. It's your turn to speak the truth. Now you speak the truth with 4 just and true verdicts. Now those verdicts speak for those 3 boys. You speak the truth with 4 verdicts of guilty. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the state of Wisconsin, it's been an honor, it's been a pleasure, it's been a privilege to present this case to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, counsel. Now, members of the jury, the duties of counsel in the court have been performed. The case has been argued by counsel. The court has instructed you regarding the rules of law, which should govern you in your deliberations. The time has come when the great burden of reaching a just, fair, and conscientious decision of this case is to be thrown wholly upon you, the jurors selected for this important duty. You will not be swayed by sympathy, prejudice, or passion. You will be very careful and deliberate in weighing the evidence. I charge you to keep your duty steadfastly in mind and as upright citizens to render a just and true verdict. You decide only whether Nya Thao is not guilty or guilty of the offenses charged. Any consequence of your verdict are matters for the court alone to decide and must not affect your deliberations. The following 8 verdicts will be submitted to you for your consideration concerning the charges against the defendant Nya Thao. Count 1 reading, we, the jury, find Nya Thao not guilty as to count 1 as charged in the information, and the other reading, we, the jury, find Nya Thao guilty as to count 1 as charged in the information. Count 2 reading, we, the jury, find Nya Thao not guilty as to count 2 as charged in the information, and the other reading, we, the jury, find Nya Thao guilty as to count 2 as charged in the information. Count 3 reading, we, the jury, find Nya Thao not guilty as to count 3 as charged in the information, and the other reading, we, the jury, find Nya Thao guilty as to count 3 as charged in the information. Count 4 reading, we, the jury, find Nya Thao not guilty as to count 4 as charged in the information, And the other reading, we, the jury, find Nya Thao guilty as to count 4 as charged in the information. It is for you to determine which one of the forms of verdict submitted to you you will bring in as your verdict. This is a criminal, not a civil case. Therefore, before the jury may return a verdict which may be legally received, the verdict must be reached unanimously. In a criminal case, all 12 jurors must agree in order to arrive at a verdict. When you retire to the jury room, select one of your members to preside over your deliberations. The presiding juror's vote is entitled to no greater weight than that the vote of any other juror. Deliberate only when all 12 jurors are present in the jury room. If you need to communicate with the court while you're deliberating, send a note through the bailiff, signed by the presiding juror, to have a complete record of this trial. It is important that you communicate with the court only by written note. If you have questions, the court will talk with the attorneys before answering, so it may take some time. You should continue deliberations while you wait for an answer. The court will answer any questions in writing or orally in open court. When you have agreed upon your verdict, have it signed and dated by the person you selected to preside. After you have reached the verdict, the presiding juror will notify the bailiff that a verdict has been reached. Everyone will return to the courtroom. The verdict will be read into the record in open court. The court may ask each of you if you agree with the verdict. With that, let's swear the officers.
All right. So,
Do you swear that you will, to the best of your ability, keep all jurors sworn on this trial together in some private and convenient place until they have agreed on their verdict or are discharged by the court, and that you will not, before they have rendered their verdict, communicate to any person the state of their deliberations or the verdict they have agreed upon?
Okay, with that, we will now select the alternates. Because it's August 12th, what I usually do is use 8 and take the number 12 and add them together and get 3. So 8 and 3 are the two numbers. And by the way, you're given random numbers randomly too. So we are going to say your name in this situation because we don't know where you're at. That will be the only time I ask that media not record it. Go ahead.
Pamela Knutson.
I'm going to mute. I didn't want them to say the names. Okay, so that's it. So that ended 3 hours ago, right? I think. Ish. Live. No, 56 minutes ago. So that means that that makes more sense. That means that they've been deliberating for about an hour. About an hour. So that's where we're at. I don't foresee it being a very long deliberation, but I could be wrong because the last trial was somehow a hung jury. And I cannot help but wonder if the hung jury from the last trial had a lot to do with Black, because especially since they didn't bring him back this time to testify. So that is what we have right now. And they don't have a live camera going for this. It's just, we hopefully get notified when there's a verdict. So next up on our agenda, we have they're supposed to be going live for the final hearing for Robert Tellis. Now, they've been going back and forth with him about the, well, not necessarily with him, with the offices of the place where the victim worked, about getting information and some of the confidential sources and stuff like that from his computer. The defense is wanting access to that stuff because they think it could involve or include some exculpatory, goodness gracious, I can't even speak. Exculpatory information or evidence. So they've been wanting access to it, but this has been a big First Amendment argument about whether or not they should be allowed to have access to that. So it's been kind of a big situation. Yes, this is the man who is on trial for the murder of the journalist. So there is a hearing that begins for him at 3 o'clock my time. So what I plan on doing is going live about, what do I have it set for? I think I have it set for about 30 minutes before. So it's set for 3 o'clock my time. So I have it set for 2:30 Central. So that's in 1 hour from now. So in 1 hour, we're going to be going live, and we'll talk about some more of the intro to the case. I kind of gave you a brief explanation earlier. Actually, let's change it. Let's give ourselves an hour because there's a little bit more to it. Let's do an hour because I feel like 30 minutes might not be quite enough time because there's a good amount of stuff that we have to go over, which is like 30 minutes. Edit. We'll do it that way. So I'll set us up to where I'm going to redirect us over there. So it will automatically send you over there. I'm going to end this one so that I can take Lucy OUT in between and get a couple of things done. And then, let's see, redirect, save. Okay, so it'll automatically send us over there. So I will see y'all over there in about 30 minutes. And we will do I gave you the Cliffs Notes version earlier, but we'll do our introduction to the case and what's going to be involved in it. And then we'll watch the live hearing. Sound good? Sound good? This is one that some of y'all had requested. So it'll be an interesting one. I think I read that they have 20 witnesses that are expected to testify for the prosecution and 12 for the defense, I think. So, it'll be an interesting one. So I will see y'all over there in about 30 minutes. And then I will keep, I'm following along with the local news for the Thao trial. So hopefully we will get some kind of notification when we get a verdict back for that one. Okay, sound good? All right, I'll see y'all soon.
Yeah, I gotta go. I can't stick around here forever.
It was wonderful. Everybody behaved. Everybody's always so nice to me.
Just love your channel.
Goodbye. How the heck do I get out of here?